Torah is just a long string of numbers. Some say that it's a code sent to us from God.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's just good stuff. Check this out, okay? The word for the Garden of Eden, Kedem. Numerical translation, 144. Now the value of tree of knowledge, all right, in the garden, right? Eitz HaChaim, 233. 144, 233. And you can take those numbers. So
You know, like the Fibonacci sequence?
Fibonacci's
an Italian mathematician in the 13th century. If you divide 144 into 233, the result approaches theta.
Theta?
Theta. The Greek symbol for golden ratio, golden spiral.
Wow. I never saw that before. That's like that series you find in nature? Like the face of a sunflower?
Wherever the spirals.
You see this math everywhere.
Welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you are about to attain true gnosis. And with Jacob Berman today, you know, just kind of a last minute thing. You said you were going to go live with Robert Price. You said he couldn't come. I was like, fuck it, I'll go live. You know, we could do it live tonight. But we're going to talk about early because you know one of the big topics on my channel that there's so much to even get into that I can do this for 10 years and not even get through half of it is early Christian sources and just the whole insanity of those, like what those are, like what's how much contradiction, how many different viewpoints, how many different Jesuses, how many different fucking types of baptisms, all that, whatever you want. Like there's so much to go through. There's so much to go through. You know what I mean?
The waters are very, very murky because, yes, there's a lot of debate and uncertainty about what those sources are. And when we can't agree on what the early sources are, that kind of creates a problem, especially when people want to try to debate reconstructing historical Jesus, because debates about reconstructing historical Jesus are complicated by disagreement on what the early sources are.
You know what's crazy is I don't know. You brought up a historical Jesus. I wasn't even going to bring this up, but
I was just giving an example.
No, I know this is great. So much has changed, even like what even scholars are even saying at this point. Like for example, one of the big historians of the 20th century is Will Durant, right? It's first half of the 20th century, so the early 1900s to like 1950. He's a big deal. It's one of the biggest ones. And he wrote one of his famous books is called Caesar and Christ. And just listen to let's look at this. Let me share my screen and just show you like how different they thought of the question of the historical Jesus was so different than how people approach it today. Listen to what he writes. This is the introduction of chapter of 26. And Christ and Caesar and Christ by Will Durant. And he says, he just asked the question straight up, did Christ exist? Is the life story of the founder of Christianity the product of human sorrow, imagination, and hope? a myth comparable to the legends of Krishna, Osiris, Attis, Adonis, Dionysus, and Mithras? What? This is the leading historian. This is what he's saying. Early in the 18th century, the circle of Bowen broke, shocking even Voltaire. By the way, and if anyone's a history buff, Voltaire, one of the great historians of the century before him, right? One of the great historians, privately discussed the possibility that Jesus had never lived. Bowen propounded the same doubt in his Ruins of Empire in 1791. Napoleon, meeting the German scholar Wieland in 1808, asked him no petty question of politics or war, but did he believe in the historicity of Christ? So the leading is probably the leading historian of the 20th century, early 20th century, first half of the 20th century, is showing the what's going on, and is like people in his time and even the centuries leading up to him, going back to Napoleon and Voltaire, doubted the historicity of Jesus. This was a serious question by the great historians of the time. This was a serious question. Now, my question is, what changed? What extra data have we gotten recently in the last 50 years, 50, 60 years, that all of a sudden makes this so this question's off the table now? Just saying. I don't think we haven't found anything. We haven't discovered any fucking thing, anything that like makes the discovery of Jesus. Like, there's no extra data. Maybe you can say our methodology has evolved. Fair enough. Maybe that's what the case is. But it's just interesting to see that this is one of the this question was a serious question for a long time. So
yeah, what's changed is, like, we got one of the big things that changed is that we got the Dead Sea Scrolls, which don't mention Jesus anywhere.
right. Why would that happen?
Ones we got, and the Nag Hammadi text. I remember when I was reading about the history about the Gospel of Thomas, what the immediate reactions were to when that document was found, and I got a separate paper in the works on that about reconstructing a first edition of Thomas. And this is not a hypothetical text, because some of you probably know about how I feel about hypothetical documents, but we actually do have manuscript evidence for this earlier edition, like the Oxyrhynchus papyri, and also early attestation for it, like from Hippolytus, and also Papias knows about it too. And the Recognitions actually quotes a passage from Thomas that's not even in our version of Thomas today. It was removed. And in Thomas, it's interesting because you have James being portrayed as a leader. And this is going to be, I think this is relevant to our discussion tonight, because earlier Christians viewed James as a direct successor to Jesus, and Thomas is definitely one of those documents that does.
Yeah.
Alexander Victor 4,310 $2 super chat.
Hold on one second.
Eusbius Praeparatio Evangelica OG Propaganda.
That was weird.
Alexander
It came in twice.
Victor 4,310 $2 super chat. Eusbius Praeparatio Evangelica.
I don't know why it's doing that.
OG Propaganda.
I don't know why.
Muted myself, and I still heard it double.
Real? Yeah, I don't know why that happened. That was weird. It came twice. Hopefully that doesn't happen next time. Eusebius Preparatio Evangelica. Yeah. I mean, it's one of my favorite texts because it has so much information that no one else, that there doesn't exist anywhere else. Like the Phoenician history is in there, for example, and other porphyry fragments are in there. That's why I love it. But you're right, it is straight up propaganda. It's literally like the whole goal of that text is to like make you think that Jesus was supposed to be the fulfillment of everything, not just Judaism, but everything. Like, whether you're a pagan or a Jew, you better bow down to Christ because he's always been in the works. That's basically the goal of that text. But thank you for that super chat. Now, you mentioned the Oxyrhynchus version of Thomas, because you're right. There's different. There's the Coptic one. This is the Greek one.
Yeah.
And it says these are the hidden sayings that Jesus spoke, and Judas, who is also the twin. That's also another way to translate it.
Yeah.
This one is also Thomas, but you can literally translate as Judas, who spoke to Judas, who was also the twin. And he said, whoever finds the interpretation of these sayings will not taste death. Now, notice that. Notice how, and now there's debates on when to date this text. Is it there are some people who think it's the oldest gospel ever. This one right here. Some people will say, no, it's like 2nd century. It's like, whatever. Okay. Either way, let's look at it. The point that I'm trying to say is, notice how he says, whoever finds the interpretation will not taste death. So salvation is not about faith. Salvation in this particular instance, it's about gnosis. It's about how you interpret this text. Isn't that interesting?
It's definitely, it's interesting because it takes away from the idea that the resurrection, belief in the resurrection of Jesus will give you salvation. This is something very different from that. And just to be clear, as I've been saying for a while, I'm in the camp that Thomas is the earliest, but not the Thomas that we have today. The first edition of Thomas, which is much, much, much smaller.
Notice how you can tell the Nag Hammadi is a translation of the Greek, because the Greek would never write Didymus Thomas, or they would never write Didymus Judas Thomas.
This text is comparing it. It's a comparison.
No, that would be like saying twin Judas twin.
Well, here's what's funny. Here's what's funny about that. If you go to the Gospel of Thomas, and I'm trying to find. Okay, there's actually a saying in here that contradicts itself literally. And it's in saying 46 in the Coptic version. I'm going to read from it right now, and it says, Jesus said, from Adam to John the Baptizer, no one's been born who's so much greater than John the Baptizer that they shouldn't avert their eyes. But I say that whoever among you will become a little child will know the kingdom and become greater than John. Wait a minute. You just said that John's greater than everybody. Now here's how you become greater than John. That doesn't make any sense. If you look at the recognitions, because it's not, this part of it doesn't survive in the Oxyrhynchus version, but in recognitions, which is quoting the same version that we see in the Oxyrhynchus papyri, recognitions knows half of that saying, but not the other half. It knows the bit about John being greater than everyone, but not how you become greater than John. So the Coptic version is adding the other half of it to give their readers a way of becoming greater than John. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, that is crazy how that works. Thank you, Block and Pan, for the 5 memberships on both sides. Appreciate that, man. You can see, I like this. Whoever website, I don't know whose website this is, but they put together both versions side by side.
Yeah, I think I like that because it shows the readers like the differences between the two. So that's very good.
You can see the Coptic is more beefed up. It's got more.
Big time.
And that's usually you find that with later versions. There's added stuff. I mean, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes you can take stuff away, but not always. More often than not, it's more. The later ones have more beefed up, and so you can see like the one seeking not stop seeking until he finds, and when he finds, he will marvel, and marveling he will reign, and reigning he will rest. He says, Jesus says, if those polling you say to you, look at the kingdom in the sky, the birds of the sky will go before you. Or if they say that is beneath the ground, the fish of the sea will go preceding you. And the kingdom of God is within you and outside of you.
Dropped $4.99 super chat. Hard to say for certain, but proportion of canonical gospel sayings is much less in Oxy Tom we have than Cop Tom.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Well, yeah, it's more the Oxyrhynchus at Thomas in some ways actually parallels in a more somewhat restricted sense with the triple tradition material and partially so, but the Coptic version has more parallels to the double tradition material, but some of the double tradition material is still in the first edition, because in recognitions it actually quotes part of Thomas. Let me take a look here. It's in so saying 46. Saying 54 is quoted from the recognitions. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of heaven." So that's in the first edition. Just to be clear, There's 2 times, actually 3 times, sorry. 3 times the recognitions quotes Thomas, the first edition of Thomas, that's missing from the Oxyrhynchus papyri, just to be clear.
Yeah.
And so what I do is I combine what's in the Oxyrhynchus papyri and the recognitions quotations of the first edition of Thomas together to reconstruct it. And there may be more stuff in it than that survived. Like there may be more in it than we can currently know. But when you look at it, it's actually pretty consistent. Like you can find there's another saying, and they're saying 27, but this is in the Oxyrhynchus version. Jesus said, if you do not fast as regards the world, you will not find the kingdom of God. If you do not observe Sabbath as a Sabbath, you will not see the Father.
Oh yeah, that's people want to say this is totally 100% Gnostic. It's actually not really.
More Jewish.
Yeah, because why would Gnostics aren't telling you to keep Sabbath?
Right.
So like this is something in between. This is, and that makes me think it's older, because if this was a third century Valentin, or not Valentin, third century Sethian Gnosticism would not say something like that. They would not.
Yeah,
this is not a third century. This is not a late Gnostic text. This is early.
Yeah,
this
in
is
my paper,
Taoistic early text that hasn't split off from Judaism yet.
Yeah,
telling you to keep the Sabbath. Are you kidding me? That's got to be early. But look
in
at
my paper
mentioning the Pharisees. The Pharisees and the scribes took the keys of Gnosis. They hid them. That's like you wouldn't be writing about the Pharisees and scribes if this was later. You know what I mean? Right. So this is
in my paper, I compare the Coptic version of Thomas to Manichaean thought, because I actually think that Cyril of Jerusalem is correct. That I think Cyril was in the 4th century. That Thomas, the one we have now, was actually created by Manichaeans. When you compare the Coptic Thomas to Manichaean literature, what do you see? Manichaeans talk about Toma, the twin who appeared to Mani, their prophet, their founder of Manichaeism. And so they have the divine twin, and Manichaean texts talk about how the human body is imprisoned light. That's the same thing you see in the Coptic Thomas, that we are imprisoned light. Yeah. So the theology is very similar, and you see none of this, absolutely none of this, in the Oxyrhynchus Thomas.
Yeah, and this idea, though, oh shit, Bart Ehrman had translated the first line of Clement for the Loeb Library. Yeah, man, good for you, bro. I didn't know that. Cool. So we're reading Bart Ehrman's translation here, but you can see light as the concept of light is very ubiquitous in early Christianity. That type of concept of the light and darkness, you find that in the Dead Sea Scrolls as well. Sons of light,
sons of light, sons of darkness. Yeah.
Look, it says this is Clement. This is from the 90s AD. This is one of the earliest Christian texts we have outside of the Bible. Only 1st century text that we have outside of the Bible, actually. And the Lord wants to remove the burden from his soul to reveal a light to him, to mold him with understanding, to give justice. So there's this idea of bringing light bringer. That is very, and then you get in the letter from Pliny the Younger. He says the early Christians, what are they doing? He says they're getting up at dawn to watch the sunrise. So that's you know what I mean. That's watching through him who called us out of darkness into light. That thing. Another thing you find in Clement, this early Clement letter, is the phoenix. And this is a huge deal to me. When I found this out, this was a long time ago, but I'm just saying, when I first discovered that Clement wrote about the phoenix, I was like, my brain was broken. And this is the moment when I realized this whole schism between Orthodoxy and Gnosticism is a made up schism from Christians after the beginning of the 3rd century, maybe end of the 2nd century, maybe like 185. So if somewhere between 185 and 225 AD, then they start to look back and go, oh, that Gnostic shit is not for us. But if you actually place yourself in the time of Clement right here in the 90s AD, he would not have seen he would not have seen that schism at all. And he's actually citing Gnostic literature. This is from the Gnostic Nag Hammadi scriptures. This story, word for word, too. Word for word. He says there's a bird called the phoenix, a unique creature that lives 500 years, and then it makes he gives us this whole process, and then he says, and then it flies from Arabia to Heliopolis, and then it says, at daytime while all are watching, it flies onto the altar of the sun, literally the altar of Helios. I mean, this is like, what are we pagans? What's going on here? The altar of Helios? It says it right there. You can see it. And then he says it deposits these things and hastens back. And the priest examine. What priest? What priest? Priest of what? What are we talking about here? Priest of Christian priest? No. These are just random Egyptian priests, dude, pagan priests. And they examine this, and he's literally admitting this miracle happens in Egypt. And what happened to this? This is one of the saints of the church, one of the first popes of the Catholic and Orthodox Church, patriarch, if you want to call it that for Orthodoxy. That he's part of both traditions, and he's talking about this Gnostic pagan miracle of a phoenix, and no one cares. It's just right, sitting right there. It's just mind blowing when you find this stuff out.
Clement is a major problem that I think that a problem for the standard view that hasn't really been focused upon or really noticed, and the tendency among those that are, say, skeptical of the standard view of Paul's letters, which I'm in the territory of that, but not necessarily in the same not in the same way as others are. I don't push the letters super late as some others might, but they'll say that 1 Clement's a forgery from like the mid-2nd century, and there are some scholars are getting on board with that.
That's not like a dominant view, though.
But it's not. But what I was going to say is
a very minor view, and if you had to say there's a consensus that people do think that's legitimately from the 90s.
Yes, and I'm in agreement with that. And when you look at 1 Clement, it's massively ignorant of New Testament material. It does not know anything about. So when it talks about Paul, and it talks about Paul like a couple of times, and that's it. He never mentions the co-authors, Sosthenes, Timothy, Tertius, Silas. These co-authors are never named in 1 Clement. He has no idea who they are, and he mentions one letter of Paul, Epistolen. He does not use the plural form that we see in 2 Peter, Epistoles. Like he knows a letter. Now, some might say, well, that doesn't preclude that Clement didn't know other letters. Well, here's the issue with that. Clement mentions Fortunatus. That's like the second to last verse in 1 Clement. And Fortunatus is still alive in Clement's day, which is very strange if that's supposed to be the same Fortunatus in 1 Corinthians. I do think it is, but with the letters situating things decades earlier in the past, that's kind of strange. So is Fortunatus alive for many decades? I doubt it. And the typical view is that Clement knew 1 Corinthians because he talks about Paul complaining, or I'm coming more to the view more like reporting about a division in the church between Apollos himself, well, not really himself, but more like Apollos, Cephas, and others.
By the way, I'm noticing some like really like drooling stupid people in the chat. I think this is from your side actually. If you don't know about the Gnostic schism, the Marcionite Valentinian schism in the early church, this channel's not for you. This is you're too low tier for us. Go watch. I don't know what's a better recommendation. What's more 101 level for this guy? But you're just way behind, dude. You're just way behind. If you don't know about Marcion and the church and Valentinus and what was going on in Rome in the first half of the 2nd century, and you don't know about the literal Irenaeus and Hippolytus and Justin Martyr, and they're against heresies, then just stop embarrassing yourself. Go leave your comments. Just go around the wall at your own house because no one's paying attention to you. Sorry, I have to. When I see something that bad and that confident, I have to say something. I have to. It's just so funny to me. The internet is full of these people, man, who are so stupid, but they're so confident in their stupidity. It's an epidemic. It is. Go ahead.
I mean, I remember seeing some people. I think I saw somebody suggest that Marcion didn't even exist. Marcion mythicism. I'm like, yeah, wow. I don't know what to say to that. And there are some people out there that think
you want to doubt Marcion's existence. Fine, I don't agree with that. But if you don't even know that there was a schism in the so-called Gnostics with the so-called Gnostics in the 2nd century, like you're not even close to where you and I are at. Like you are just not even. You should not be here. You shouldn't even be in the conversation. Bye. So, anyways, go ahead.
But back to what I was saying about 1 Clement, it's just massively ignorant. It doesn't. There's no evidence that 1 Clement knew the Gospels. There's no evidence that he knew. It doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't actually reference much from the Gospel. That's weird. But Paul's letters, though. Paul's letters too. And, other than Christ crucified, that's all you get.
Yeah, and I think Clement knew at least one, and I don't even think that Clement even knows who Paul was even writing to, because when he talks about that letter, it's in. I think it's in. Let me see if I can find the reference. It's in. I think it's in 1 Clement 47, somewhere around there. Yeah, here it is. Take up the epistle of the blessed Paul the Apostle, 1 Clement 47:1. And he never tells you who Paul's writing to anywhere. He doesn't make it really clear that he's writing to the Corinthians. Now, one could argue, well, he wrote you, or the way he says you, or you could try to say unto you, I suppose. But even then, it's still not clear. It's supposed to be to the Corinthians. And he doesn't know the title. The title of the letter is not the same as canonical 1 Corinthians, even if you believe it's a letter to the Corinthians, which I think can be disputed. I don't think it was. I don't think what Clement knew was a letter that Paul specifically wrote to the Corinthians, but it's more like to many provinces simultaneously. It's more of a general text, like.
Yeah,
it's multiple provinces at the same time, not specifically one only.
What I'm actually interested in getting into is, it's technically a later source, the Pseudo-Clementine text, but from my understanding is the stuff that's in the Pseudo-Clementine literature represents real, actual data of the early church from the late 1st, 2nd century type of period. And so when you pull up the like this, I think this is it right here. Is this it? No, wait. Where did I do with this Pseudo-Clementine? Where did I just put it? Is this it right here? This is it right here. Okay, cool. This is from the Pseudo-Clementine, right? And he starts talking about this tradition of Simon Magus. And there was this idea that Simon Magus and Jesus both came out of the school of John the Baptist. So you have this Samaritan school and you have the Galilean school. And John the Baptist is like the master of both of those traditions. And so there's this whole baptism cult in the Galilee, in the north, is all from John the Baptist. They thought he was divine. They thought he was chosen. And you can see this reflected in the Gospels. Whoever wrote John, for example, is acknowledging that people thought John was like divine, but they actually want to make you think Jesus is more divine, right? So there's like if you were a Mandean, because the Mandeans didn't think Jesus was the Son of God. They thought John was the Son of God. They would say, oh, whoever wrote John, that's propaganda. They're trying to usurp John. But whoever wrote this, Clementine, maybe it's Clement, maybe it's not, who knows? This person's trying to say that they're both from the same tradition. And he says that Simon's father was Antonius, mother was Rachel. He was a Samaritan from the village of the Getanes. He was a magician, well trained in the Greek literature, desirous of glory, boasting above all of the human race. He wishes to be believed on an exalted power, which is above God, the creator, and to be thought to be the Christ. So Simon Magus is claiming to be the Christ. And he's so-called the standing one. And then you find out what this means. It means he's the standing one, as in John the Baptist was the standing one. And after John the Baptist, it was either Jesus or Simon. And Simon became this is what he says. He says the name implying that he can never be dissolved, asserting that the flesh is so compacted with power of his divinity that it can endure to eternity. Hence, therefore, he's called the standing one, and that he cannot fall by any corruption. For after that, John the Baptist was killed. And as you yourself know, when Dositheus, I forgot to mention Dositheus, he's in between them. Dositheus had broached with his heresy with 30 other chief disciples, and one woman who was called Luna. And that's, you see what's going on here. When
Yes.
the 30 appear to have appointed with reference to the number of the days, according to the course of the moon. And Simon's ambitious of evil glory, as we have said, goes to Dositheus, pretending friendship, entreats him that if any one of these 30 should die, he should straightway substitute him in room of the dead. For it was contrary to the rule either to exceed the fixed number or to admit anyone who was unknown or not yet proved, whence also the rest, desiring to become worthy of the place and number, are eager in every way to please, according to the institutions of their sect, each one of those who aspire after admittance into the number, hoping that he may be deemed worthy to be put to the place of the deceased when, as we have said, anyone dies. Therefore, Dositheus, being greatly urged by this man, introduced Simon when a vacancy occurred among the number. Anything on that so far?
Yeah, I the way I look at Simon is he is kind of to John what Paul is to Jesus in the sense that Simon is kind of taking things, kind of derailing things for John's movement and saying, I'm the real guy, I'm the real deal, I'm the Messiah kind of thing. He's God now.
I'm the next in
Forget
line.
About what was that?
And I'm the next in line, he's saying.
Yeah. And Paul's like, I got a vision now. I'm the real deal. I got Jesus speaking through me. And I know the real teachings better than people that knew him, actually.
And if anyone's wondering where this so-called Gnostic group actually comes from, I think, and I don't know if this is a consensus or not, I don't really care, but my understanding is
Mandean origins.
Yeah, because these people right here,
I have the same view.
Yeah, because look at this. The word manda means knowledge. So these are literally Aramaic Gnostics. This is it's Mandaic, but it's a Semitic. It's like very close to Aramaic, right? And they're literally called Gnostics in the Aramaic tongue. And so like you can imagine John the Baptist starts this cult, right? And maybe it comes out of Samaritan Mount Gerizim Judaism, right? And it rises up as a contemporary what do you call it? A competition to Jerusalem Judaism, or even Alexandrian Judaism. You have three different Judaisms. Maybe there's the Essenes down in Qumran. Maybe that's four. I'm saying this is probably its own form of Judaism that was going on, and they call themselves Gnostics, but they're in this language, right? And then you can see John the Baptist comes along, starts this cult, and then after him, Simon the Magus comes around, and he starts spreading it. Because Clement even says he was trained in Greek. He knew the Greek classics. He says he knew Plato, he knew Heraclitus, he knew Pythagoras. That's what they said. And when you read, by the way, we're going to read it too. I'm going to pull. I have John I have the surviving text from Simon Magus himself. It's called the Great Declaration. You can tell he's fucking trained in Platonism, Pythagoreanism, monism, all that stuff. He's totally philosophically trained in Greek literature. So you can see how he takes this movement and he brings it to Rome, and he takes this sect of Judaism that's all the way out in the northern Galilee, or where the Samaritans live, and then you can see how they get pit against each other. Christianity and Gnosticism get pit against each other because you have these different school teachers trying to control how this thing gets spread around. You know what I mean? So it ends up being Paul versus the Gnostics in a sense.
I think the Mandeans originated as basically as in the sense that their inception was caused by the schism in John's movement caused by Simon Magus. Simon, according to the recognitions, he says he believed himself to be the real God, or a representative of the real God, however you want to look at that. He disregarded the Jewish God. This is similar to Marcion's view. And the difference between Marcion and Mandeism, Marcion's like a half-assed Mandean, in the sense that, okay, I reject Yahweh, but I accept Jesus. It's like throwing away the salad but keeping the dressing. It's the way I
so
like to
funny you said that, because check this out. Ready?
Yeah.
I'm just going to add to what you just said right now.
Yeah.
So this is from an encyclopedia entry on doctrines of Cerdo and Marcion.
Yeah.
I think it's in the I forgot where this is from, but this gets brought. This is on the Bible Hub website too. But this is a legitimate entry into encyclopedia on Cerdo, and it says Cerdo was the student of Simon, and that's him. It was him that came to Rome in the time of Hyginus. This is one of the popes that comes after Clement, right? And I call him Pope. I know he wasn't called Pope back then. I'm just saying that's what he is now. He's on the list of popes, but he's the Bishop of Rome, right? To be more accurate. And so, according to Irenaeus, Cerdo was the successor of Simon, who is the successor of John the Baptist. And after Cerdo, you get Marcion. Marcion's the student of Cerdo. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So Cerdo took the system of Simon. He went to Rome during this Hyginus' time. And then it says Marcion of Pontus succeeded him, developed his doctrine. In doing so, he advanced the most daring blasphemy against him who is proclaimed as God. Blah, blah, blah. That's Irenaeus saying that. But anyways, the point. What's interesting about that is if you take church history at face value, Marcion's not only the student of Cerdo, who's a student of Simon, who's a student of John the Baptist, but he's also the son of one of the 70 disciples, Philologus. So it's like you could just see there's a whole line, a whole lineage, a legitimate lineage of Christian teachers who kind of get shoved to the side and get labeled Gnostic, but they thought they were legit. They thought they were the shit. They thought they were the real. If you would have asked Marcion, he said, "No, I'm Orthodox. They're heresy. They're heretics. I'm Orthodox." That's what he would have said. So same with Cerdo, same with Simon. They thought they were Orthodox. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think Marcion, I think he was influenced by these I think he was influenced by Mandeans, but he was also influenced by the Gospel of John, because the Anti-Marcionite Prologue of John, which I know is not entirely accepted by everybody that reads it, it's questioned. I pretty much take it at face value, because while somebody could try to synthesize, oh, well, whatever, it's just Anti-Marcion polemic, who cares? I'm like, well, let's slow down. It's quite embarrassing, actually. It's saying that it's suggesting that Marcion got a lot of his ideas about Judaism and the way he views the Jewish God from the Gospel of John. And it makes sense when you read passages like John 8:44, which makes out the Jews to be sons of the devil. And Marcion believed that Yahweh was an evil deity, and he thought Jesus was the son of a different, better God, which is that's why I describe Marcion as a half-assed Mandean. Like, he's not a Mandean, but his views are like Is like taking Mandeism and just half-assing it. And so what he's doing is like, okay, well, all right, they're right. Yahweh is bad, but I'm going to keep Jesus. I think he's good. I disagree with y'all on that one. So it's like it's toning down Mandeism to keep Jesus. Like, I don't want to get rid of Jesus, okay? Because Mandeism was like, we're getting rid of Yahweh, we're getting rid of Jesus, we're getting rid of Moses. Screw them all.
Yeah.
And John's the real deal.
And that's what Simon Magus does too. So you could set that's why I think there's some truth to the idea that he comes out of the Mandean school.
Yeah.
And he's also a Samaritan. He's right there. He's right in that region at that time. Like we're talking 30s AD. This is how early this is. Simon would have been teaching in the 30s AD, or at least he would have been teaching in the 30s. He would have been, John was dead by then. So, so this is what we're talking about. Simon Magus is teaching in the 30s AD. Now, the book of Acts, people might think, well, the book of Acts says that, he was just some nobody who came and got. That's a rewriting. You can tell they're trying to rewrite the history in the book of Acts. But what? The book of Acts does not fully make him evil yet. So that's why I think Acts is sort of in the middle between what you get in later, sources about Simon and Peter having a duel with Simon's evil. But that's not what Acts is doing. Acts doesn't make him evil or make him good. They kind of make him lukewarm. He gets baptized, he gets saved, but he's still greedy. He's still trying to make money. Right?
Yeah.
But that's it. They leave it at that. They don't go beyond that. But they're definitely rewriting his importance. That's why Acts is definitely written later, I think. But you can see when he's dealt with by people like Hippolytus, they're talking about he's a big deal. They admit that. Dude, Simon's a fucking big deal. He was like a big teacher in Rome. They even said he met I think he met Claudius or Nero or something, which is probably nonsense. But anyways, this is what they write about him. This is attributed to Simon Magus, according to Hippolytus. It's in the Refutation of All Heresy, but this is a fragment that might actually be legitimately written by Simon Magus. So he writes, "This is the writing down of the declaration of voice and name from thought, which is the great power, the boundless. Thus it shall be sealed up, hidden, concealed, placed in a dwelling which rests upon the universal root. Then to you then, I say, what have to say, and I write what I write, and this is the writing thereof. From the universal ions spring two shoots, which are without beginning or ending, stemming forth from a single root, which is the invisible power, unknowable silence." Now that's interesting because the Greek word is hesychist. Hesychist. That's where there's a later Orthodox tradition in the 15th or 13th and 15th century. The hesychist, they're called the silence, the silent ones. Their whole entire goal is to meditate and become like silence, you know what I mean? Anyways, of the two shoots, one appears appears from above. This is the great power, the universal nous. So you can see he's definitely trained in Greek philosophy, that sets all things in order, being males. The other appears from below. It is the great thought, which is female and brings forth all things. From this state they pair off, which each other, uniting and appearing in the middle distance, the incomprehensible air, eperon, that's another buzzword in Platonism, without beginning or end. Here is to be found but the Father, by whom all things are sustained, and by whom are nourished those things which do partake of beginning and ending, such as he who has stood, stands, and will stand, a male-female power, like unto the boundless power, which is a stranger equally to the beginning and ending, existing in oneness. For it was from this that the thought within the oneness proceeded and became two. And then he says, this was the one. For as he had her in himself, now I want to touch on that in a second, he was yet alone. He had not been so at first, though pre-existent. By revealing himself to himself, he became a second, nor could he be called Father till thought named him so. This is extremely Platonist. I mean, this is like, it's like he's taking Plato's Timaeus and rewriting it in like a new context. What do you think about this?
Yeah, that's sounds about right. Makes
And the
sense.
last thing he says at the end is, and I seem to suffer in Judea, although I did not really undergo it. I was manifested to the Jews as the Son, in Samaria as the Father, and among the Gentiles as the Holy Spirit. That is interesting because that's in a way, a Trinitarian or maybe a proto-Trinitarian reference, which is I would say more aligned with what you get from Arius. But anyways, and I permitted them to call me whatever name they pleased. The angels who made the world issued whatever laws amused them, thinking thus to enslave all of humanity, and I sought her out. I arrived on Tyre and found her and purchased her freedom. Thus I wrought the ransoming of the human race, recalling to myself the sparks of the Latin fire, which the angels use in order to order their creation, and this must issue in the dissolution of the world, but equally in the redemption of all who believe in me. So ends the great declaration or great announcement of Simon Magus.
Yeah, the implication there is that they took his triune description of himself and applied it to really in a couple of stages. First, I like to call it the baptismal trinity, what you see in the Great Commission in Matthew, in which you're being baptized in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But in Matthew, they're not described as one being. That's why I say baptismal trinity, so it's different. It's not a trinity in the sense of three forms of one, which is a later reformulation of that.
That's the Nicene Trinity.
Yeah.
The Arian
Council
Trinity.
Constantinople.
The Arian triad, where you have a Father, you have a Son, and a Holy Spirit, that's early. That's in John. So that's not surprised to find
that's
that.
That's more like a duology in John. The Father is the Son. Yeah.
Well, let me show you why I think there's a triad in John. It's not. It's more of a dyad. It's not a dyad, in my opinion. I'll tell you why. In John,
Okay.
Here, let me just pull this up. Let me show you right now. Get rid of that. So if I go to what the heck? Watch this. I'll tell you why John has a triad. I've been arguing this for a while now, and I think it's pretty strong. Let me pull up the Greek too. Okay. So if we go to John 1. John 1. He says NRK in the beginning is the Logos, right? So we already have a dyad. We have Theos and we have the Logos. As you mentioned, there's a dyad. But what does he say in verse 4? In him was life, which is en autoi zoe. That's the word for Eve in the Old Testament. In him was Eve. So inside the Logos was Eve. You see what I'm saying? It's a spiritual Adam and a spiritual Eve. He even says Eve was the light of mankind, anthropon, which is a stand-in for Adam. Anthropon is Adam. So you can see you have the Logos, which is a spiritual Adam, the world soul, and in him was Eve. And it's a dyad within the one. So it's a triad. And this is straight up Platonism. Because if we go to Plato's Timaeus, when he talks about the world soul, he says, watch this. I think it's right here. In order that the best of our power they might become as good, do we recollect rulers? No, that's not it. In the Timaeus, I thought it was. Wait, I'm trying to think. where part does he say?
Well, while you're trying to find it,
Yeah.
So the reason I said earlier that I didn't feel like that there was a Trinity in John is because I was thinking more about it did not specifically identify the Holy Ghost with God, and so that's what I meant by that.
It's
wasn't
not a
really
Nicene
thinking,
Trinity. I agree with that. It's
right,
not a Nicene
right.
Trinity.
That's all I meant by that.
The triad is present. That's why when people want to date, whenever they find Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and they're immediately their knee-jerk reaction, and it must be later. Well, not necessarily, because those ideas are present in the 2nd century. They just don't have they don't have the understanding that they're all exactly the same thing, 3 persons and 1 being. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do think John is a late text, and I think it was written around 135 CE, the conclusion of Bar Kokhba. And in my paper, let me see. Yeah, there's a scholar I cite in my paper regarding Bar Kokhba. Let me see if I can find it. Find him.
Yeah, I know some people think it's later than that. I would probably go more towards first decade of the 2nd century. My thoughts on John, probably.
It has to do with comparing the way Bar Kokhba is described. Oh, here it is, Paul W. Schmiedel in his the Johannine writings, and it was translated by Morris Caney. I think it's Morris Caney. And it says Schmiedel's argument that so this is what he says. He says, "Let us now return to a consideration of the gospel itself and ask whether we cannot really get the best information as to the date at which it was composed in the same way that we have obtained it in considering the questions who was its author, and whether the work is reliable." Now, I'm not going to quote this whole thing, but what he says here is that in the year 132, having taken the name Bar Kokhba, came forward, proclaimed himself the Messiah, and became among the Jews the leader of a fanatical rising against the Roman rule. But the result, that in the year 135, the Jewish nation finally lost its independence. The Christians, as we can well understand, declared against the new Messiah from the first, and in consequence were fiercely persecuted, so as long as he retained any power. If the 4th evangelist had experience of all this, may he not have thought that it would be understood, it would make an impression if he put into Jesus' mouth a prophecy of these events? In that case, he would have written between 132 and 140. If it had not been that, for other reasons, we have already been led to assign the composition of this book to about this date. And so when I put that together, because I agree with him, I think that makes sense, especially when you look at the Talmud, the way it talks about Simon Bar Kokhba or Bar Kokhba, as he's described as an evil man and a liar, kind of like the way John describes the sons of the devil, the murderer from the beginning, the evil one, the liar. So these are similar expressions to the way Bar Kokhba was described. If I put that together with the anti-Marcionite prologue of John, saying that John dictated to Papias, Papias wrote the Gospel of John for him because John was dictating it to Papias, and then Marcion read John, and then shortly thereafter, John expelled Marcion from Pontus. That's 130s, and the analysis by Schmiedel, when he compares the evil one, the liar, in John to Bar Kokhba or Bar Kokhba, what you want to call him, it lines up with what you see in the anti-Marcionite prologue. They fit together. The analysis, the anti-Marcionite prologue of John complements Schmiedel's analysis. Is my point.
Yeah. So I ended up finding what I was talking about with this. Plato is like, he just gets into such weird metaphysical shit in the Timaeus. It's such a crazy text. He starts getting into all this mathematical intervals. Some people compare it to the divine ratio. I think there's a reason for that. I'm not going to get into that right now. Then he says, next, he, talking about the creator, split this that he had put together into two parts lengthwise, and then he laid the twain one against the other, the middle of one of the other, like a great cross. There's just a picture of it. And bent either of them into a circle and joined them, each to itself and also to the other at a point opposite to where they first been laid together. And he compassed them about with the motion that revolves into the same spot continually. And he made the one circle outer and the other inner. And the outer motion he ordained to be the motion of the same, and the inner the motion of the other. And he made the motion of the same to be toward the right along the side, and the motion of the other to be toward the left diagonal. I'm just checking this out real quick. Okay. And he gave the sovereignty to the revolution of the same and of the uniform. For this he suffered to remain uncloven, whereas he split the inner revolution into 6 places, into 7 unequal circles, according to each of the intervals of the double, triple intervals, 3, blah, 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 blah. This is all. So let me just skip ahead. But when the construction of the soul, suitcase, right, of the destruction of the soul had all been completed. We're talking about the world soul here. So think of the spiritual Adam. And by the way, Philo of Alexandria literally says this is the creation of Adam. He's using Platonism to retell how Adam was created. He said there's a spiritual Adam and an earthly Adam. There's 2 Adams. The spiritual Adam is the Logos, and the earthly Adam is just earthly Adam. So right now, what we're hearing in Philo's idea, or John, whoever wrote John, is thinking this is about Christ, right? Now watch this. Now keep that in mind. When the construction of the soul, or the Logos, had all been completed to the satisfaction of its constructor, he fabricated within all the corporal, and uniting them center to center, he made them fit together. And the soul, being woven throughout the heaven every way from the center to the extremity, and enveloping it in a circle from without, and herself, revolving within herself, began a divine beginning of unceasing and intelligent life, Zoe. See what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's Zoe right there.
Yeah,
lasting throughout all time. And whereas the body of the heaven is visible, the soul is herself invisible and partakes in reasoning and in harmony. And this is where you get the Sophia doctrine from too. Having come into existence by the way, Sophia is called Sophia Zoe in a lot of texts too. Agency of the best things intelligible and ever existing as the best of things generated, in so much she is a compound blended of the natures of the same and the other and being. These 3 portions and is proportionally divided and bound together and revolves back upon herself whenever she touches anything which has its substance dispersed or anything which has substance and divided. She is moved throughout her whole being and announces what the object is identical with and from. So you have, he goes on and on and on. This is like super exhausting to read all this. I'm not going to lie. But what he says is, and actually, it's actually good to read this last one right here. And then when the Father, literally uses the same language, the Father that engendered it perceived in motion and alive, a thing of joy to the eternal gods, he too rejoiced. And being well pleased, he designed to make it resemble its model still more closely. Accordingly, seeing that the model is an eternal living creature, eternal living creature. See, there's Zoe right there. Zoe Phusis. That's literally nature, Zoe's nature, right? Was eternal. This quality, it was impossible to attach in its entirety to what is generated. So just to explain what he's saying here. Oh, and by the way, last thing I want to show you guys. He planned to make the the image of eternity. Ion. There's your ion right there. And as he set in order the heaven of that eternity, ionos, which abides in unity, he made an eternal image moving according to number, and he goes on and on and on. And basically what he said, what you have is you have a creator, a demiurge, a perfect God, who creates a world soul that's a dyad that has male and female within it. Adam and Eve, spiritual Adam and Eve. And that's why when I read John, I see the triad right away. It pops up. You can't miss it. And Philo said the same thing, by the way. Philo, when he talks about the logos, he talks about there being a third spirit. He talks about, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that triad's early, is all I'm trying to say. That was a long-winded way of saying the triad is early. It's not that late. The Trinity is late. The triad's not late. See what I'm saying?
Right.
Anyways, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. That's convincing. Yeah.
And then when you get into these Gnostic texts, for example, when you crack open Irenaeus, Hippolytus, or Justin Martyr, the so-called Gnostics that they're writing against all have this triad. They all have it. Valentinus has it. Who else has it? The Marcus has a triad. In fact, let me see if I can pull up. Let me see if I can pull up the. Let me see if I can pull this up real quick. Where is it? I can go to the Panarion, or I can go to this one, Refutation of All Heresies. So, look at this. Simon, his doctrine derives from magicians and poets. These are the opinions of Valentinus, and the system is not constructed out of scriptures, but out of Platonic and Pythagorean tenets. And you go look, if you did, like Simon Magus, right? He says Simon was a native of Gitta, a village in Samaria, and his successors, taking a starting point from him, have endeavored similar opinions under a change of name. Simon was adept in sorceries, making him a mockery of many, partly according to Thrasymedes in the matter which have explained above, partly by assistance of demons, and that's what they always say. But you know what? I'm not really interested in that. What I want to show you is what he says about right here. Simon the magician, he says, to teach the new parrots of Simon that Christ, who stood and stands will stand, was not Simon, but Jesus was man, offspring of the seed of woman, born of blood and the will of the flesh, as also the rest of humanity. Now Simon, both foolishly and knowishly, paraphrasing the law of Moses, makes his statements in the manner of the following. Moses asserts that God is a burning and consuming fire. Deuteronomy, taking what is said by Moses, not in correct sense, he affirms that the fire is the originating principle of the universe. So you just got he just says all this stuff about Simon, but look what he says right here. This, however, is what Aristotle denominates potentiality and energy, energeia, what Plato styles the intelligible and sensible. So this guy is basically saying all this stuff is all Platonism. He's like, this is all just like Platonism, dude. Watch this. You can see right here, the triad. the double triad of a seventh existence. And look at this. Pythagoras declared the originating number of the universe, the unbegotten monad, the generated dyad, and the rest of the numbers. And he says that the monad is the father of the dyad, and the dyad the mother of all things that are begotten. That's literally from Plato's Timaeus. The begotten one being mother of things that are arc begotten. And Zaratos, that's Zarathustra or Zoroaster, pupil of Pythagoras, which that's not true, was in the habit of denominating unity of a father, duality to a mother, and the dyad has been generated from the monad according to the Pythagoras, and the monad is male and primary, and the dyad is secondary. And the dyad, again, Pythagoras states, the triad and the succeeding numbers up to 10. Now, that, if you know anything about Pythagoreanism, you know what that is. It's called the tetractys. Let me show you guys what I mean by that. The tetractys is this. It is a sacred symbol of ancient Pythagoreanism. Tetractys. You have the 10 numbers all coming from 1, 2, 3. Here's your triad, and then they extend into a hexad and then a decade. So, and then you have all these different meetings of all these things, but it's, but what happens is this gets adopted into Judaism and the Kabbalism, not just Kabbalism, but Gnosticism. And I would argue that the Trinity has its roots in this sort of new number mysticism, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Look at the Yahweh, tetragrammaton, right? 72 letters. It just fits perfectly into this system. It makes you wonder, What do you think? I'm talking too much. Take over.
No, I think those are good connections. I don't have much more thoughts than that.
Well, I mean, what do you think about the School of Simon in general?
Yeah, it's like I was saying earlier. I see it as being deeply connected to the origins of Mandeism, and that the Mandeans, I think, the movement was basically in a sense founded by John, but influenced by Simon. I would say it's more, let me reverse that. It's more like they are founded by Simon, is another way of putting it, but they decided to reject Simon's view that he is the true one, and that's like, no, we're gonna go with John. So really, both points can be true at the same time. It's John's movement that took in some of Simon's views, but they didn't keep everything that Simon said, if that makes sense. And then later on, you have Marcion that reacts to them. It's like, well, yeah, y'all are right. While being influenced by John's gospel, of course, that Yahweh's a bad dude, he's a bad God, and Jesus is the son of a greater God. So that's where I want to keep Jesus. I don't agree with y'all to get rid of Jesus, because they get rid of Jesus, they get rid of Moses, they get rid of God, they disregard the authority of the Old Testament. And Marcion does most of that, except with Jesus. He keeps Jesus, as I've said.
Yeah. The Dositheus figure is very fascinating. I don't think he gets enough attention. Do you think that Saulus of Josephus was mixed with Simon to produce literary Paul? Acts duplicates characters, multiple Pauls, James, and Peters.
I think that's probably a question for me, because he knows about my views on Paul's letters making use of Josephus, which I do think they do. And let me give a brief example of that before
break it down.
So there's a huge error that is in 2 Corinthians that doesn't really make any sense if Paul wrote it, because it's in 2 Corinthians 11:32-33, and I've had various opinions of it over the years, but I came to the conclusion that no, that's an error. We really can't square it. In Josephus, he says King Aretas III controlled Damascus. He never mentioned King Aretas IV. In my paper, I quote scholar Abraham Negev. Abraham Negev basically went scorched earth on this whole King Aretas business. He said, sorry, guys, there is no evidence here. There is no archaeological evidence. There's nothing. I'm paraphrasing, but he's basically saying that the meaning of what he says is what I'm talking about, that the only reason to believe King Aretas IV controlled Damascus is because of 2 Corinthians. We have no evidence anywhere outside of it that corroborates his claim. So Acts comes swinging and corrects the error to Corinthians and says that Paul fled from Jews, not Aretas. Aretas never shows up in Acts. Well, I wonder why. Because the author of Acts knew 2 Corinthians was wrong about that. And so to get to Backen's question here, I think that Paul's letters basically provide material from Simon's ministry and they apply it to Paul. I'm not claiming that Paul and Simon Magus are the same. Bob Price believes that. I don't. But Simon was given some of the roles. Paul was given some of the roles that Simon had and I think you should pull this one up. It's in book 1, chapter 71 in Recognitions. This is important.
Okay.
In Recognitions, it tells you where it's getting its information from. And this hasn't really been talked about before. I'm going to get it up on my end as well. So
Clement, Recognitions of Clement, you talking about?
Yes.
I think this is it right here. Yeah. What's in book 1?
Move up to 70. It's a book 1, chapter 72, actually. So I was almost right. It's chapter 72 of book 1.
Okay. So what, just that, because it's in Roman numerals. What's Roman numerals for 70? What's that again? You know?
Well, I can't remember either. Hold on. I'll just look.
Wait, what number is it?
An LXX2.
LXX2? Okay, it's right here.
There it is. Now, let's stop right there. Let's pay really close attention to this. I talk about this in my paper as well. While therefore we abode in Jericho and gave ourselves a prayer and fasting, James, the bishop, sent for me and sent me here to Caesarea, saying that Zacchaeus had written to him. Now let's focus on that. Zacchaeus had written to him. Why is that important? Scholars often talk about how the Recognitions is utilizing the preachings of Peter. It's now the way they talk about it, they make it sound hypothetical. I'm going to set that to the side and focus on what's being said here, the implication here. The reason why this is important is because you go back 2 chapters before this, you get a story about Saul attacking James. And Zacchaeus is writing letters talking about this. And so book 1 is getting its material from Zacchaeus. So Zacchaeus is actually the one that's giving us this information about Simon Magus. And that's how the Recognitions knows about it. Zacchaeus is talking about it. And so the author of the Recognitions, one of his major sources for his information is Zacchaeus. That's why this chapter is so important. Now, what does Simon do? When Saul attacks James in chapter 70, Simon Magus was there too. And he was arguing with James. He was arguing against his followers before the attack on James actually happened. But it's around the same moment. Now, in Recognitions, Saul doesn't argue with nobody. He's ordered by Caiaphas to go out and eliminate James. And that's what he does. He tries to and fails. James survives the attack. Although Abdias of Babylon, quoted by so-called Pseudo-Dorotheus of Tyre, says that some other man, an unnamed individual of a Fuller's Club, brained James. So shortly after James survived the attack, he is in fact killed by someone else of a Fuller's Club. Now, Saul, in the recognitions, or really Zacchaeus' writings being used by recognitions, he's being given the role of arguer, if that makes sense, instead of the killer, or the attempted killer, the assassin. He's now arguing theological points like Simon does. You see my point, Neil? So
Yeah.
the role kind of switches up. It's so that now Saul's the one doing the arguing, not trying to kill somebody. And so that's what's going on. So in that sense, he's mixed up with Simon. Now, Bacon is asking about Solus of Josephus, which is another matter. This is in Wars, and we're told about this individual called Solus, and he was a kinsman to Herod Agrippa II. The Acts of Paul and Thecla base Paul's death under Nero, this mythical death under Nero that never happened, with Solus's appearance before Nero in Wars. Because he and his brother Cristoborus appear before Nero because they want to blame the cause of the entire war upon Governor Florus. In the way Josephus writes about it, it sounds like it's a dangerous endeavor to do so that might get them killed. And we never hear from those two again, by the way, after Josephus talks about it. So I think they really were killed.
Talking about right here.
Yes, that's it. You got it. And that's when they just fled Herodium. They just fled Jerusalem. The war had just begun, and they go see Nero, and we never see those two again because I think they were killed. And I think that's the basis for Paul's death under Nero. They were Lucius Carinus, the author of the Acts of Paul and Thecla in the late 2nd century or close to it. He read this, made use of Josephus, like no different than Luke Acts did. Is like, oh yeah, I'm gonna say that's Paul, and I'm gonna say that Nero killed him because that's what happened to this guy. I'm gonna pretend that's Paul, even though he knew better. That's not Paul, but he just claimed that it was Paul. Yeah, so he's conflating that man with Paul.
Who is?
And that's how I'm sorry.
Who's conflating him with Paul?
Lucius Carinus, the author of the Acts of Paul and Thecla, where we get the story of Paul's mythical death, beheading under Nero, which he somehow survives, according to the story, which is ridiculous.
Gotcha.
He's like, oh, he rises from the dead, and his head gets reattached to his neck. Come on. So, I think here's what I think back, and as I've said before, Solus of Josephus was combined with Paul. I think the historical Paul died in 39. I don't think he lived later in the 30s. And I think what's happening is the idea that Solus of Herodian is being merged with Paul, and that idea comes in Romans 16. And Romans 16, Paul is called a kinsman to a Herodian. And then in 2 Corinthians, Paul is fleeing from Aretas. This is a connection. I've tried to explain this before. Some don't get it, but here's what's going on. Why does 2 Corinthians portray Paul as fleeing from Aretas if that Romans 16 bit isn't what it looks like? Who was Aretas going after in the 30s? Who was he going after? Herodians. Exactly. So that's what's going on in 2 Corinthians. That story is being transplanted into the letters. So now Paul is running from Aretas, and the reason for it is given in Romans 16. He's being portrayed as a Herodian. So just to be clear, I don't think Paul is actually a Herodian historically, but I think the text is trying to make us think he is, and that's why he's fleeing from Aretas, just like the Herodians were running from Aretas, like begging for the Romans to come in and save them of an army. But in doing so, the author of 2 Corinthians made a mistake because King Aretas III controlled Damascus 100 years earlier. King Aretas IV never controlled Damascus. King Aretas III controlled Damascus back in the 70s, 60s BC, somewhere around there. So it is an error. And scholars have been all over the map and I mean all over the map, trying to solve this problem. There is no clear answer to it that they can come up with. They come up with different answers because it's an error. And to me, it's kind of funny because had this mistake been in Mark, let's say the Gospel of Mark made this mistake, Neil. They'd be like, "Oh, Mark gets things wrong all the time. Matthew and Luke correct Mark." But if it's in magical Paul, he must be right. We can't have him be wrong about that. You see what I mean? There's a bias to like make Paul not be an error about something like that. But if it's in the Gospels and the Gospels make a mistake about giving somebody the wrong title, or of a province, the ruler of a province with the wrong title, you know what I mean? Just like, oh yeah, well, that's the Gospels making mistakes all the time, but Paul, oh no, that man can't make a mistake. He's flawless. I'm being a little exaggerated, but not by much. So yeah, I think it's a very long-winded answer, but I think that the letters are mixing things up in Josephus, just like Acts will do later. But I do think Acts in some way does a better job and makes less mistakes with Josephus, but it also makes new ones too. So it's not totally off the hook.
Interesting. Thank you for that one. This is an interesting one right here. This is actually, I'm glad they brought this up. The abracadabra amulet is the form of a triangle. You showed a picture of it. Have you researched the amulets? I'm asking you this because I definitely have. I've definitely talked about it on my channel. They're asking you this though, I think. Maybe they're asking you.
It's probably more of a question for you than is for me.
Yeah, I've definitely looked into this. For example, like just to show you, if you go to that abracadabra, if you just like look up the abracadabra thing, just had it up. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Here we go. You can see like this is these crosses. So it's obviously Christian related. And this is 6th, 7th century AD. This is late. And they're still messing around with abracadabra magical amulets in Christianity. This is a thing that happens. If you read the Greek magical papyri, you'll find abracadabra. You'll find, this type of thing all over the place. And that goes from 2nd century AD to 7th, 8th century AD. Very, very late. People are still making these. These are Christian magical amulets. But you can see it traces it back to Basilides, invoking the beneficent spirits against the diseases of misfortune. It was found on Abraxas stones. You can see abracha, abracadabra, right? You can see that's where the root of the abracadabra is actually in the Gnostics, those Basilidians. You can see Basilides was this early Christian, early 2nd century. I mean, he's supposedly taught between 117 and 138. That was the time he taught during the reign of Hadrian. So he was around, which means if he's teaching at that time, he's an elder, which means he was probably a student in the 1st century during the times when Peter and Paul were still alive. You know what I mean? If however late they get there. So Basilidians survived until the 4th century. Epiphanius knew of Basilidians living in the Nile Delta. So this is a big deal. They survived for centuries. Look at this. Their doctrines were often similar to those of Ophites and later Kabbalah. So this wasn't just some random little tiny heresy. These were serious early Christian teachers who influenced a lot of doctrines later on. It says Basilides claimed to have been taught by Glaucius, who was a disciple of Peter himself. So he's only two students removed from Peter himself. That's how early he is. And let's see who this Glaucius guy is. I guess they don't have anything on him. But Glaucius is mentioned in Paul's letters, I believe, right?
I don't remember. Something like that.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, They kept the anniversary of the baptism. They had the January 6th thing going on. And they're big into these amulets, these abracadabra, abrasocks, those type of things. So there's a whole lot of, here we go right here, abrasacks. The Great Archon, they call it. Here's another one. It's like, this is what the amulets look like. It'll say Ya'o, abrasocks, and then this says cacao. Cacao. So let's see, we got another super. Thank you for that super chat.
At Vacan_Pan_ Danny B's dropped $5 super chat. Mariam worship was adopted early in women leaders. What happened to prophecy movements? The healing ministry? Charismatic gifts? Was it proto-orthodoxy?
So I have a good, I talk about that in my video a lot, actually. Prophecy got replaced by bishops. So
Grandpa.of.10 dropped $5 super chat.
Good to see you, Grandpa. Good to see you, Grandpa. Thank you for the super chat. The prophecy movements, this is actually a good question, because the earliest Christians are all into prophecy. They're all speaking in tongues. Paul even says himself, some of you have gifts of prophecy. Some of you have gifts of tongues. Some of you have gifts of gnosis. And we all put our gifts together because we're all part of this thing. We're all in this together. But that mentality changes real quick. When you start getting to like the 180s to 200 AD, the Irenaeus and Hippolytus like, no more prophecy, because there's just too much. There's so many conflicting prophecies. How do we know whose is real? So what happens is they come up with the idea, bishops. Ordained bishops are the only ones who can declare, things within the church. So it used to be prophecy. Peter gets a prophecy. No longer do we have to obey dietary laws. Peter got a prophecy. Okay, new law. And then eventually it just got too out of hand, because we have all these different churches doing all these different things because they have all these different prophecies. And so what happens is they said, Irenaeus says, it's the bishops. We need bishops. We need leaders. We need overseers. And that's what happens. It was bishops versus prophecy. And that's the biggest, that's really what happened in the end of the 2nd century. But there was this group called the Montanists. I don't know if you know who the Montanists are. I'll show you what I mean right now.
Yeah, I know who they are.
Yeah, this was a big deal. Big deal. Here it's New Revelation. Early Christian movement from the mid to late 2nd century. And then it's from Montanists.
At Alan0465 dropped $2 super chat. Do you see Marcus referencing the Chi in Timaeus?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know if that's what they're trying to do, or if they think that I've been thinking about this, actually. I've been wondering, like, if the Christians, I think there is a Christian source. I forgot who it was, like Origen or somebody, makes a remark about Plato prophesying Christ or something. And I wonder if Christians thought that Plato was like somehow prophesying the cross when he mentioned that cross thing in his Timaeus. Is Mark referencing it? I don't know. That's a good question. I'm not really sure. Maybe it's possible. What do you think about that, Jacob?
Yeah, I think in a way he is. But when you talk about the blind man, Bartimaeus being healed by Jesus, and one of the two blind men stories in Mark. And I think some scholars have made connections with that story. We're not talking about the Gospel of Mark. I got it mixed up.
Oh, yeah,
I totally got that mixed up. Yeah.
But
which Mark are we talking about?
What do you mean, the Gospel of Mark?
Okay, I wasn't wrong.
I think so, right?
Yeah,
It should be.
because isn't there a story in Timaeus where they talk about there's a story in Timaeus where it talks about Plato's cave, and they're trying to it's like they're trapped in their own little world, if I remember correctly, and it's some people try to say it kind of reminds them of a dream state or something like that. It's been a while since I looked at it, but I think Bartimaeus is a reference to some degree to Plato's Timaeus. I think it's named after. I think the character is named after him.
Mark.
Is that
So
actually-
Mark 10. You're talking about
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Mark 10.
Yeah, it should be there.
Let's take a look at it.
Yeah,
Mark.
Mark 10, 46, 52.
And they came to Jericho, and there's a multitude. Bartimaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the wayside. And when he heard that it was Jesus the Nazarene, he was about to cry out and say, Jesus, the Son of David, have mercy on me. And they rebuked him that you should hold peace. And he cried out, thou Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus still stood and said, call ye him. And they call, I hate these fucking ye translations, dude. They suck. Give me a real translation. Here we go. So they called the man who was blind, saying, take him, take courage, stand up. He is calling for you. And throwing off his cloak, he jumped up and came to Jesus. And replying to him, Jesus said, what do you want me to do for you? And the man said, was blind, said, Rabboni, I want to regain my sight. And Jesus said to him, go, your faith has made you well. Immediately he regained his sight and began following on the road. Now, this must be new to me. What exactly does this have to do with the key in Timaeus?
Well, I guess it probably doesn't. But what I was really more like making it connect to Timaeus, the title of Plato's Timaeus.
Timaeus.
Bartimaeus.
Oh, son of Timaeus. His name is literally son of Timaeus.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, I'm such an idiot. I'm looking out for the word like key or like tau or cross or something. I'm like, where is it going to come up? I'm like, you're talking about the guy's name being Bar, which is Aramaic for son, and Timaeus. Huh. Yes. I wonder if that is a reference to that. It literally says it right here too, by the way. Son of Timaeus.
Yeah.
I don't know. Could be. It's definitely something it's definitely worth like investigating. You know?
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thought. Oh yeah, the thing that I wanted to pull up was the Montanist. These people right here. Montanism held views about the basic tenets similar to those of they were labeled heresy. They were labeled heresy, but their belief in prophetic figures. So he was asking about prophecy. This is what you're talking about. This is one of the last holdouts of that early Christian doctrine of revelation, prophecy. That's why so many of these early texts are the apocalypse of Peter, the apocalypse of John. That's literally the revelation of. That was what early Christianity was all about. It was all about revelation. And at some point, the idea gets taken over, and now it's about bishopic authority. Some accounts claim that before he was converted to Christianity, he was a priest of Apollo or Cybele. Huh. That's interesting. I wonder how much overlap there is between the Montanists and the Nacenes, because they're both in Phrygia. And they're both big into prophecy. Look at this sort of frenzy and ecstasy. He raved and began to babble and utter strange things, prophesying in a manner contrary to the constant custom of the church handed down by tradition from the beginning. Thus, the Phrygians were seen as false prophets. So they're called Phrygians. And that's literally what Hippolytus calls the Nacenes, calls them Phrygians. He literally just calls them Phrygians. That's literally what they call them. But I'm pretty sure the book of Revelation was their central text, if I'm not mistaken. I think it says it. Yeah, right here. Because of what is known about Montanus' source, to believe that those differed from the church, the new prophecy was also a diverse. It reminds me of the new atheism. New atheism, but it's new prophecy. Was a diverse movement and what Montanus believed varied by local and period. Montanism was particularly influenced by Johannine literature. We've talked about that already.
Yeah.
Especially the Gospel of John and the Apocalypse of John, Revelation. So isn't that interesting? All these wild heresies are, for some reason, they're always centered around John. Something to think about. Something I noticed very early on, a long time ago. Or Luke, like Marcion having Luke. That's something I noticed. But more often than not, they go to John. It's usually not Mark or Matthew. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We should go to the Nacenes real quick to show people what that is. You know? What do you think?
Yeah.
We'll do Hippolytus Nacenes. There's some crazy shit in here. Watch what you're about to see. If you haven't seen the Nacenes yet, this is just some other level of shit right here. So, how do I get rid of this stupid ad? Oh, right here. So he says the origin of the name and the Nacenes. Preceding books, I have elaborately explained the opinions provided by speculators among Greeks and barbarians respecting divine nature and the creation of the world, consideration of the sources of magic. The Nacenes, according to the system of advance by them, magnify as an originating cause of all things a man and a son of man. And this man, a hermaphrodite, see, you can already see the Platonist world soul shit happening right now.
Oh, yeah.
And is denominated among them Adam. And hymns, many and various, are made to him. The hymns, however, to be brief, are couched among them in some such from this, from you comes father, and through you comes mother. And if anyone's wondering, this is dated to this is middle of the 2nd century, probably 150, 160 AD. Two names, immortal, progenitors of ions, of denizen of heaven, you illustrious man. But they divide him as Geryon into 3 parts. For, say they, of this man, one part is rational, another psychical, and earthly. That is fucking Platonism, dude. They say the soul, the tripartite soul, is from Plato's Timaeus. Literally, that's literally from Plato's Timaeus. He literally says the soul has one part rational, one part physical, and or one part psychical and one part physical or earthly. So you have your psyche, and then you have your logos, and then you have your flesh. And they suppose that the knowledge of him is the originating principle for a capacity of knowledge of God. Expressing themselves thus, the originating principle of perfection is the knowledge of man, while the knowledge of God is absolute perfection. All these qualities, however, rational, psychical, and earthly, the Nicene says, retired and descended into one man simultaneously, Jesus, who was born of Mary. And these 3 men, the Nicene says, are in the habit of speaking through Jesus at the same time together, each from their own proper substances to those peculiar of their own. According to these, there are 3 kinds of all existent things: angelic, psychical, earthly. And there are three churches: angelic, psychical, earthly. And the names of these are elect, called captive. He says their system goes through Mariam, James, the brother of Jesus, and they have the Gospel of Thomas, Syrian theory of the soul, mysteries of Isis. What? Look at this. Earth, the Greek says, Greeks, gave forth a man, earth, first bearing a goodly gift, wishing to become mother, not of plants devoid of sense, nor beasts without reason, but of a gentle and highly favored creature. It, however, is difficult, says the Nicene, to ascertain whether Alacomenius, first of men, rose upon the Boeotians over Lake Cephisus, or whether it were the Idaean Curetes, a divine race, or the Phrygian Corybantes, whom first the sun beheld springing up after the manner of the growth of trees, or whether Arcadia brought forth Pelasgus of greater antiquity than the moon, or Eleusis produced Dialis, an inhabitant of Raria, or Lemnis begot Cabirus, a fair child of secret orgies, or Pallini brought forth Phlegraean, Alcyonus, oldest of the giants. This is such a crazy doctrine. But the Libyans affirm that Iarbas, firstborn, on emerging from arid plains, commenced eating the sweet corn of Jupiter. Now, what you just heard in that whole paragraph, these are all the progenitors in different mythologies. So you have Adam, you have Pelasgus, you have Lemnis, you have Cabirus. These are all the different Adams and different myths being put together into one doctrine. He's trying to unify all the pagan stuff with the Christian stuff. That's what he's doing. He's literally synthesizing all the cults into one cult. That's what this guy's trying to do. But the Nile, the Egyptians, he says, up to this day, generating animals, renders of living bodies, which acquire flesh from moist vapor. The Assyrians, however, say the fish-eating Oannes was the first man. That's an old myth right there. That's an old Assyrian myth right there. He's the half fish guy. You know who that is? You ever seen Oannes?
No.
I just want to show people who might not know. Oannes is this guy right here. Wait, where is he? Let me share my screen. So this is obviously someone very educated, by the way. Whoever wrote this down knows a lot of shit. This person's spending a lot of time in libraries. So that's what Oannes looks like. He's like a fish guy. It's not Dagon. That's Oannes. And he's actually found, the way you would find Oannes in Greek sources would be through Berosus. So he probably read Berosus. Babylonian priest Berosus had the form of a fish, but with the head of a man. Oannes is probably the emissary of Ea. Huh. Let's see. The Chaldeans say that it's Adam, the first man who alone brought forth earth, and he lay inanimate, unmoved, and as still as a statue, being an image of who is above. That's a retelling of Adam, right? You know what that is? That's a Platonist retelling of Adam. That's what Philo would say. That's what Philo would say about Adam. You know that, right? Here, let me show you something real quick.
Yeah.
If you go to the Wikipedia page for the World Soul, Anima Mundi, let me show you what I'm talking about. Suke Cosmo, right? It says, it talks about Plato. We just read that. And then it says how there's all these different doctrines that are using this doctrine, right? Stoicism has their own version. The Gnostics have their own version. Hermeticism has its own version of this. You can see how popular this idea is. But if you keep going, you can see, where is it? Manichaeanism. I thought Philo was in here somewhere. I thought Philo was in here. No? It says Philo right here, but I don't see him anywhere. Huh. Wait, I thought there was an entry in here for Philo's application of the world soul. Maybe it's maybe I'm thinking of something else. Maybe I'm thinking of the atom, the earthly or the spiritual atom or something like that. What is it called? It's called the
second atom.
It's called like what is it called? Something. It's called something. I'm blanking out of it right now. Adam Cadmon, is that what it's called?
That might be it, yeah.
I think this is it right here. Here, yes, I found it. Okay, so it's called Adam Cadmon, which is interesting because this is actually what they use as the Nicene doctrine. So Adam Cadmon, primordial man, also called Adam Elion, and it's God's infinite light, blah, 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 Kabbalah crap, right? But it says the earliest usage, Philo. Isn't that interesting? The first expression of the original man or heavenly man was Philo, in whose view, Ganikos, Uranios, Anthropos, heavenly man, right? As being born in the image of God, has no participation in any corruptible or earth-like essence. So this is not the original Genesis that you guys all know from the Bible. This is a retelling of Genesis. And it's not, and by the way, this is before John. So what is Philo talking about here? If there isn't already a doctrine floating around, is what I'm trying to get at. Whereas the earthly man is made out of loose material called a lump of clay, the heavenly man, as the perfect image of Logos, is neither man nor woman. We just saw that in Timaeus. But an incorporeal intelligence, purely an idea. While the earthly man, that's the word for form in Greek, is idea. While the earthly man, who was created by God later, is perceptible to senses, partakes in earthly qualities. That's in the works of Philo right here. That sucks. It doesn't bring you right to it. I want to actually go right to it. Wait, why do they have this Latin title here? What does that mean? Hold on a second. That is on the eternity of the world, I think it's called.
At Forterhouse 11 dropped $2 super chat. L was used in the OT until Moses meets Yahweh.
No. That's what a lot of people will say. A lot of people will try to make that they'll say, oh, that's when Moses found out his name was Yahweh, which is fine, but the text doesn't do that. Genesis is already calling him Yahweh, and then he gets, and then you know what I'm saying? Like Yahweh is already there. He's already calls him Yahweh throughout the text. But yeah, that's the claim. The claim is that Moses found out the name of Yahweh after he met him on the mountain, and then when he wrote Genesis, he just went back and kept his name there. Whatever. That's how they argue it. Let's see. So on the creation of the world by Philo, and we don't have to go to it, right? We don't have to. I think the Wikipedia page explains it pretty well. We don't have to exactly go to it, but he does say this Adam Cadmon doctrine, right? And it says right here, setting out from the duplicate biblical account of Adam, who was formed in the image of God in Genesis 1:27, whose body God formed out of the earth, Genesis 2:7. So what happens is the scholars will say that's because there's two different versions. They have the documentary hypothesis explains that away. Philo's like, hell no. Philo would say, hell no. That's exactly what the author intended, which I don't think he's correct. But Philo would argue there was two atoms. One of them is an earthly atom. One of them is a heavenly atom. That's what's going on. Philo would literally argue that he argues this in the book called On the Creation of the World. And you can see it. And then later Kabbalah adopts this idea. And so does Christianity, by the way. Christianity adopts this too. It's not just Kabbalah. Kabbalah adopts this. Christianity adopts this in Christ. They say the first Adam was Christ, the Logos. He's the first Adam. Right?
Yeah.
So
Similar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very similar.
So when you go back to the Nicene preacher, watch what he says. He says, I think he even uses the term kadmos. No? No, he doesn't. Where was I? Wait. No, he doesn't say that. Never mind. I thought he uses that term in here. Maybe not. Wait, where was I just at? I don't want to. Oh, right here, Oannes. Adam is the man brought forth. So he says this Adam was unmoved, still as a statue, being the image of who is above. Therefore, finding that the great man from above may be overpowered, from whom, as they say, the whole family. I'm just going to skip along a little bit and show you something where he says, and an entity of this description, the Assyrians call Adonis or Endymion. And when it is styled Adonis, Venus, he says, loves and desires the soul. When styled by such a name, Venus is production according to them. And whenever Proserpina or Cori becomes enamored with Adonis, there results, he says, a certain mortal soul departed from Venus, that is from generation. And then you can see over here, he says, the Egyptians who, after the Phrygians, established are of greater antiquity of mankind, and they confessedly were the first to proclaim to all the rest of the men the rites and the orgies. At the same time, all the gods, as well as a species of energies, have the sacred and august, and for those who are not initiated, unspeakable mysteries of Isis. These, however, are not anything else than what by her of the 7 dresses and sable robe was sought and snatched away, namely the pudendum of Osiris. They say that Osiris is water, but the 7-robed nature encircled an array with 7 mantles of ethereal texture, for so they call the planetary stars, allegorizing and denominating them ethereal robes, is as it were changeable generation, and is exhibited as the creature transformed by the ineffable and portrayable, the
At Snowstill
inconceivable.
dropped $2 super chat. One of the Gnostics copied Philo on this verbatim.
Yeah, exactly. This is all. Philo is the one who started all this shit. He really is. And he says it right here. The just will fall 7 times and rise again. And then he quotes Luke 17. For these falls, he says, are the changes of the stars moved by him who puts all in motion. And right here, he says it right here. Worshipping, however, Calenius with special distinction, they style him Logios. For Mercury is Logos, who being interpreter and fabricator of the things that have been made simultaneously, and that are produced and that will exist, stands honored among them, fashioned into some figure as the pudendum of a man having an impulsive power from the parts below towards those above, and that this deity, that is a Mercury of this description, the Nicene says, a conjurer of the dead and a guide of departed souls, an originator of souls, nor does this escape the notice of the poets who express themselves thus. Kalenian Hermes, also called the souls of mortal suitors. This whole doctrine is basically what he's trying to do. He's trying to unify the pagan world with Christ and Judaism. He's trying to make it all, like, he's citing Old Testament scripture. He's citing prophets in here. He's citing Chaldean mysteries, Hermetic mysteries. He's citing Eleusinian mysteries. He cites the Gospels. He cites Paul's epistles. Literally cites Ephesians right here. Romans right here. Like, this guy knew Paul's epistles. He also knew Plato. He also knew the Old Testament. Like, right? This is crazy shit, right? Look at this. This is the Christ who, he says, in all that has been generated is portrayed Son of Man from the unportrayable Logos. This, he says, is the great unspeakable mystery of the Eleusinian rites. Hua, kua, that's how you pronounce it in Greek. And he affirms that all things have been subjected unto him, and this is that which has been spoken. Their sound is gone forth unto all the earth. Romans 10:18. Just as it agrees with the expression, Mercury waving his wand guides the souls, but they twittering follow. Twitter, follow? That's funny. Follow me on Twitter. That's an interesting prophecy right there. And I mean, the disembodied spirits will continuously in such a way as the poet by his imagery delineates using these words. And as when in magic caves recess, bats humming fly, and one drops. From ridge of rock, and each of these things closely, the expression rock, he says, he uses of Adam. This he affirms is Adam, the chief cornerstone, become the head of the corner. I place this rock at the foundation of Zion. The Logos. What do you think about this, Jim?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I don't really have much to add to that.
Somebody said, Jesus is referred to as the second Adam. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And he's the second Adam in the sense that you heard of Adam, you heard of him as Adam next. Or he's the final Adam. He's the eternal Adam. But in another sense, he's also the original Adam because he was there before Adam. He's the firstborn in a spiritual sense. But yeah, he's also called the last Adam, right? The last Adam. The first.
Yeah, that's right. 1 Corinthians 15.
That's right. That's right. Let me pull that up actually. Good idea. 1 Corinthians 15. First Corinthians 15. Which one?
I don't remember the exact verse. Just the word search Adam. It's there. He's there.
Here it is.
There it is. Yeah.
First man Adam became a living person. The last Adam was a living spirit. That is straight up Philonic Judaism right there. The two Adams is straight up Philo. I'm not going to even show you where he says this in Philo in book 7. No, it's in On the Creation of the World. So let me go to that real quick. Philo. Wait, is it on the creation of the world or on the eternity of the world? I think it's on the eternity of the world. And he says, he says, let me see if I can find it actually. I think it's in chapter 46. Let me see if this is it. Wait, it's not the right one. Wait, what's the name of the book again? On the creation of the world?
That's right.
I think it's on the creation. His Philo has so many books. It's on the creation of the world, or is it? Yeah, on the creation of the world. Not on the. I'm in the wrong book. Hold on a second. Okay. I think this is it. I think this is it right here. Let me just pull this up. Where he says, go back to the original creation of the universe, the sun and moon, the earth bore the plants. For he has no need of his heavenly offspring, on which he bestowed powers, but not independence, like a charioteer grasping the reins of a pilot. He guides all things in what direction he pleases, the law demands. Is this the right one? Wait, hold on. Let me just see something for a second. Philo, expression, heavenly man. I wonder if this is, I think this is the right one. Oh, yeah. Heavenly man. No? That man and miniature heaven might correspond. I don't know. It's in here somewhere. I'll have to get that ready for next time. I'm not going to keep searching for it. It's in there somewhere. What else? What else, man?
Well, I think I could talk about who I think wrote the recognitions.
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah, man. Let's hear it.
So the way I look at it is that I think it's called pseudo Clementine because a different Clement actually wrote it. Let's pull up the Shepherd of Hermas, because the Shepherd of Hermas mentions another Clement in there. I'm gonna go to well, where's search my paper? Okay, here we go. We receive only the apocalypses of John and Peter, though some of us are not willing that the latter be read in church. But Hermas wrote the Shepherd very recently in our times in the city of Rome, while Bishop Pius, his brother, was occupying the episcopal chair of the church of the city of Rome. Okay, that's not quite what I was looking for. Let me see. All right, here we are. Thou shalt therefore write 2 little books, and shall send one to Clement and one to Grapte. So Clement shall send to the foreign cities, for this is his duty, while Grapte shall instruct the widows and the orphans, but thou shalt read the book to his city along with the elders that preside over the church. That's in the Shepherd of Hermas.
Mm.
And so what this Clement is doing is he's writing to multiple provinces, which is not what the Clement that wrote one Clement in the 90s was doing. This other Clement is writing to a larger, wider range audience, multiple different audiences. And it's kind of like the guy that we see in Recognitions, this traveling Clement that's going around in multiple provinces. You know what I'm trying to say. So this is happening. And the reason why I read that other passage about Pius being Hermas's brother is it ties into the point that I'm making that this is happening around 150-ish, circa 150 CE, when Bishop Pius I was in charge of the episcopacy in Rome. And what's going on here is you have this Clement, he's writing to multiple provinces, just like what we see happening in the Recognitions. You have this Clement that's going around in multiple provinces. Now, this Clement, I like to call him Second Clement of Rome because that's technically right. What he's doing is he's not a bishop. Notice that the Shepherd of Hermas never calls this guy a bishop. And the reason why I'm making that point is because in the Recognitions and in homilies, this man called Clement isn't calling himself a bishop there either. That happens much later. It's not in those texts. It happens later that Clement is being referred to as bishop. Do you see what I'm getting at? So the idea that it's pseudo-Clementine is because we're under the impression that it's being attributed to the earlier Clement. Now, I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's one of the later Clementine letters, so-called pseudo-Clementine letters, where he starts to actually call himself a bishop. It does happen later. And that's what gives the impression, okay, he's attributing it to Clement of Rome back in the 90s. And there is how we get the whole idea that it's pseudo-Clementine. Now, the other thing I talk about is citizen. Now, I mentioned this a lot earlier in our stream. You have this situation where it is believed that the Recognitions was written no earlier than the 3rd century because because citizen was fought by a scholar or two, or a few scholars, that it knows about Emperor Caracalla's blanket sedition decree, that everyone's going to be citizens of the empire. Everybody inside the Roman Empire is now a citizen. Foreigners doesn't matter. Everyone's citizens now.
The Edict of Caracalla.
Yeah. But here's the problem with that claim.
Okay, well, just real quick, let me just ask you. There are scholars who are saying that it looks like there's knowledge of this in the pseudo-Clementine text.
Yes, and I'm explaining why I don't think that's true.
Okay.
Because there are about 7 occurrences of citizen in the Recognitions, and every single time, other people are being distinguished from citizens, which makes no sense if the Recognitions was talking about Caracalla, because then there should be a statement about everyone is a citizen of under the empire, but no such statement exists in the Recognitions. Also, the scholars that make this argument do not take into account the Shepherd of Hermas, which indicates that there really was another Clement in the mid-2nd century who was in touch with multiple different provinces, multiple different communities, which is similar to the traveling Clement that we see in the pseudo-Clementine literature. And so that's a problem. And they don't address it.
What passage does it mention that?
Mention what?
Supposedly mention the citizen stuff.
It's multiple. So pull up the Recognitions.
Okay.
And just word search citizen. There's 7 occurrences of it.
Right here. Yeah, because why would it mention citizen if everyone was a citizen?
Yeah, it's stupid.
Their argument is that everyone's a citizen. If they're showing this sounds like it's saying everyone's a citizen.
Yeah, I don't know why they think this, but there's a scholar or two that argue that this is because everyone's a citizen. I'm like, no, they're if you read all instances of the word citizen in the recognition, you'll see what I see. They're distinguishing other people from them.
Yeah.
There is no knowledge of a blanket citizenship. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good point, Mick.
Yeah. So to me, I think the 3rd, 5th century dating of recognitions is just it's based on really bad arguments, stupid arguments. And I don't say that often. So like you got to really have a really bad argument for me to put it that way. And it's atrocious. I think the scholarship on the recognitions right now is a travesty. It really is. Like, are we really going to fall for this? Blanket citizenship is known in recognitions? Are you kidding me? No.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't be opposed to the idea that this might be later, like a 2nd century, maybe not 90s AD, like literally written by Clement.
No, yeah, I think it's written around 150 by the other Clement.
Okay.
The Shepherd Hermas is talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my argument. The other dude, the other Clement wrote it in the mid 2nd century.
Sure. That makes sense.
Yeah. That's why I brought it up. I think he collected letters from the 30s written by Zacchaeus. And this probably included letters from Peter as well, but definitely from Zacchaeus, that he put together. He used his letters to tell us the stories about Simon Magus and the attack on James by Saul. But he integrated that material into a larger framework of historical fiction that he was writing.
We should explain to them what this is so people understand. So what happened was that Caracalla, where did that? I just had that page up. Where did it go? Okay. Caracalla was the Roman emperor in 212 AD. And this was a time when there was some shit going down, dude. Let's just say there was about to be a collapse of the entire economy. And there was. And in the time of the Severan period, it was already starting to go downhill. I mean, after Marcus Aurelius, it's downhill from there. And the Severans sort of get things back in order for a little bit. But what happened is Caracalla passed this edict. He thought a good idea would be, instead of making like what Rome always has been, become a citizen is divine status, basically. You're either born into it because both your parents are citizens, or you earn it through the military or something like that. Well, Caracalla thought, you know what? You know what would be a good idea? If we just made everyone a citizen, and then everybody will have to, maybe we can get more taxes or something. I don't know exactly the reason was, but he thought it would be a good idea to just unite the whole empire by making everyone a citizen. And it didn't work. The after his reign, not long after his reign, the Roman Empire sort of collapses, and this didn't work. Basically what happened. Anyways, he made everyone a citizen, and shit went downhill from there. In fact, I think most people would agree, Rome was never the same ever again. The Roman Empire was never the same ever again, ever again, from this point forward. So, yeah. If anyone's wondering what we're talking about, they call it the Constitutio Antoniniana, or the Edict of Caracalla. And it was just like some last ditch effort. Maybe if we make everyone a citizen, the economy will improve, and blah 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 blah, and it just didn't work. So, Mary Beard distinguishes the history of ancient Rome up to 212. I agree with this. I've been saying this. I did not even know Mary Beard says this. Effectively a new state masquerading under an old name. Fuck yeah, dude. I didn't know she said this. I've been saying this for a long time. to me, the Roman Empire ends in 212. I've been saying this for years now. I don't know if anyone who like really watches me, you might have heard me say this. The Roman Empire didn't fall in 476. It fell in 212. After this, it's a whole different thing after this. Mary Beard agrees with me. Who's this guy? Anthony Caldis says Rome went from an empire to a world, and this decision would later underpin the enforcement of uniform religious belief. Yes. Couldn't agree more. Edward Gibbon, this is one of his big criticisms of the Roman Empire, but he thinks Christianity is the reason why the Roman Empire fell, but he also says this is a big reason too. The edict at a cost to which the auxiliaries, which primarily consisted of non-citizen men. But yeah, it looks like most historians agree that this was a failure. Like nobody thinks that this was a great thing to do. Just saying.
Yeah, basically domino effect from there.
Yeah. Yeah. Sol Invictus. What else, man? Well, you had some other ideas, right?
Yeah, we could talk about Corinthus next. We hadn't gotten to him yet.
Corinthus is a good way to. I think I have something on him real quick. Let me see if I can find it. No, I have Serto. Do you have Corinthus though?
Yeah,
because Serto is right after Simon, and he's the predecessor of Marcion. But I think we already mentioned him.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, okay. You can pull something up.
I'll read from. I'll start with Irenaeus against heresies. 3:4.
Yeah.
There are also those who heard from him, Polycarp, that John, the disciple of the Lord, going to bathe at Ephesus, and perceiving Corinthus within, rushed out of the bathhouse without bathing, exclaiming, "Let us fly, lest even the bathhouse fall down, because Corinthus, the enemy of the truth, is within." Polycarp himself replied to Marcion with him on one occasion and said, "Do you know me? I do know you, firstborn Satan." So what's happening here is we're being told about a story about Corinthus and John confronting each other at a bathhouse at Ephesus. Now, this is just after Domitian's persecution is over and Nerva is emperor now, because Domitian was killed in late 96 CE. And so John's back in Ephesus now that Domitian is gone. And what's happening is that they're having this confrontation. Now, the reason why this is very interesting to me, and this plays a major role in the Paul paper, is because Epiphanius, and finding these passages on Epiphanius is a lot more difficult to find. Like against heresies, you can pull up on the internet easily, but the translations on Epiphanius are not as fully readily available.
I got. You talking about the Panarion?
Yeah, Panarion. Yeah.
Yeah, I got the whole thing right here.
Oh, you do? Okay.
I have the entire,
all
of it, dude.
When I try to look it up on the internet, I have a harder time finding it.
This is like the most qualified translation that exists. Like
that might even be the one I'm using in my paper.
Yeah, it's got to be. This is the standard translation. Like this is the best one.
It is.
What was the passage you said?
One moment. 28 2 free to 4 free.
Wait, 28? You mean section 28?
Yeah.
How does it start off? Corinthus?
Yeah.
Oops. There it is.
Yeah, so as you'll see here, the claim that what we're being told about here is that Corinthus believed that Jesus was possessed by the Christ at the baptism. Yeah, because when Jesus was baptized, Christ entered in.
The Holy Spirit comes down.
Yeah.
It says right here, comes down like in the form of a dove. Now this is presented in John, and this is funny. He says nothing different than Carpocrates. This is exactly right. This is what Carpocrates thought, was that Jesus, the flesh Jesus, is an immortal man who was born from Mary, and he's just a normal guy. And but he's also from the Davidic line through Mary, so he is chosen for a reason. So he does have a bloodline that's special. But the Logos, which is eternal, comes down from heaven while Jesus is being baptized by John, and that's when he becomes one with the Holy Spirit. And you can see this in John. So, for example, we go to John 1. Go to John 1. Hold on a second. You can see John testified with him, saying, "This is he who is coming after me. He who is coming after me has proved to be my superior, because he existed before me." And then it asked John if he's Elijah. I baptize in water. Behold, the next day he saw Jesus come and said, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes the sin away from the world. After me is coming a man who has proved to be my superior. I have seen," so okay, then it says, and I did not recognize him, but so that he would be able to reveal to Israel, I came baptizing in water. And John testified, saying, I have seen the Spirit descending as a dove out of heaven. He sees the pneuma, katabion. The pneuma is doing a katabasis, coming down from Uranos to remain on him. And then it says, I did not recognize him, but he who sent me to Now, here's what's important about this. We're still in John 1. This is the beginning of the gospel, right? Notice what didn't happen yet in John. What didn't happen? Do you think you can guess? What didn't even happen yet?
The baptism.
No, this is the baptism. I'm saying before this.
Right, of course it is.
Nothing, no birth. There's no virgin birth.
Yeah, there's no infancy narrative.
That's not part of the Johannine doctrine. It's not part of the
Just like the Gospel of Bart.
They don't give a shit about his birth. They don't give a shit about his birth in John. It doesn't matter. His birth does not matter. There's no virgin birth. It's a normal birth. They don't even care about it. It doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter at all. What matters is he is born when he's baptized. The day he becomes baptized, he becomes begotten by God. And he literally says right here, the Son of God. The next day, John was standing and two of his disciples. Behold, the Lamb of God. And he says, let me see. Where is it? Here it is right here. It says, I have seen the Spirit descending as a dove out of heaven, and I did not recognize him, but he who sent me to baptize in water said to me, he upon whom you see the Spirit descending and remaining on him, this is the one who baptizes in the Holy Spirit. And I have seen myself and have testified that this is the Son of God. So he becomes begotten by God. Once he sees the Holy Spirit descend on him, that's when Jesus becomes the Son of God. So the Logos becomes flesh in this moment. And according to Johannine Christian doctrine, they don't care about the virgin birth. They don't care about, all they care about is the baptism. So they don't even celebrate the birth of Jesus. They only celebrated the Epiphany, which was on January 6th, which was this moment right here. The Epiphany was the birth. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it just starts, and then it just goes right into John and disciples and Jesus. It just gets right into it. Like John does not waste any time. So, just says, follow me. And he says right here, we have found him of whom Moses wrote in the law and the prophets, Jesus, son of Joseph from Nazareth. Nathanael said to him, can anything good come from Nazareth? Philip says, come and see. And then he says, here is it truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit. And Nathaniel goes, how do you know me? And I don't know who Jesus. I never met you before. And he says, before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you. So now he's a new Jesus. He's now the Holy Spirit, the Logos has taken over Jesus, has possessed his body. So now he's an eternal figure who knows everything. He's all knowing. He's got the mind of God now. Notice how the change in that how he's completely different now.
Yep.
You surely are the King of Israel. Truly I say to you, since you will see heaven opened up and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. That's how that chapter ends. So, yeah. But yeah, this is the whole point I'm trying to make here is that this is the Corinthus doctrine. And it's funny because people they claim that Corinthus might have wrote John. There's like some rumor, and the Orthodoxy is trying to shut that down by saying no, John hated Corinthus, right?
Yes. Caius of Rome was the one that claimed that Corinthus wrote John.
Right.
But and Revelation. Yeah.
But whatever version of John is existing now is actually anti-Corinthus and anti-Basilidian or Carpocrates, because they wrote in the doubting Thomas scene on purpose to fuck with all these Johannine Christians that didn't believe in that. They all thought that Jesus was a spirit.
I also think that John did that as a response against Tom, the first edition of Thomas.
Yeah.
So I actually think that Elaine Pagels and Mark Goodacre are both simultaneously right. Goodacre says Thomas knew John. Pagels says John knew Thomas. Well, I would say that John knew the smaller Thomas, the first edition of Thomas, and fuller 114 sayings version is the one that knows John. John had a problem. The only super early text he has, the only eyewitness document he had to work with was the Gospel of Thomas. The problem is there's no resurrection narrative. There's no parousia. There's no miracles. He's not even a son of God. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And so say, okay, well, I need to deal with this. This is too many omissions here. And so the Synoptics don't touch Thomas of a 10-foot pole on this. So what John does is like, I'm going to tackle this. And he's like, I have the ticket. I know the ticket. I'm going to make up the beloved disciple. So the beloved disciple is everything Thomas is, but so much better. He is there for all the major important events, and he's swayed that Jesus is the Messiah, and he's the eyewitness. He's another eyewitness for John to use. John gives you a hint that I'm a super late gospel, but everything I say is the testimony of the beloved disciple. You see my point? And so everything that's in here is valid because it came from the beloved disciple, who I'm not even going to tell you who it is. Now, if you read James Charlesworth's book, The Beloved Disciple, highly recommend it. He goes through a bunch of different comparisons between different theories about who the beloved disciple is. And I think the beloved disciple is basically a fictional character like Hugo Mendes would say. And I would say that what John's doing is he's creating a new character that's based on Thomas. So Charlesworth says that the beloved disciple is Thomas, by the way, that's his view. But I don't think he is Thomas. But again, it's a certain point of view. But the beloved disciple was created as a counter to Thomas instead, from my vantage point. I would say the beloved disciple was created to replace Thomas with a new eyewitness, one that John likes, one that's convenient for him. And that's why the Synoptics don't talk about him, because John created this beloved disciple to replace Thomas. And so that way, Thomas is supplanted, and Thomas becomes a believer anyway. John creates another convenient thing, like another literary device. I'm going to make Thomas become swayed of everything that I want Jesus to be that Thomas doesn't tell you Jesus is. So that's how he gets around this gap. Thomas becomes convinced, which is ridiculous. So that did not happen.
Yeah.
He just wants people to think that. Which
And it's kind of how you can tell there might be a different version of John that precedes the one we have.
Well, I think the strongest argument for it
because
is
it's at the end too. It's not like it's like in the middle of John. It's towards the end.
Yeah, I'm very wary of hypothetical additions of gospels and proto-gospels.
We know Mark has that going on.
Well, it's at least a provable instance. And I mean, I would even say that we know who wrote it. If you look at the Armenian manuscript family, we're told that Oristion wrote it. His name is right between Mark 16:8-9, and they're saying that he wrote the longer ending. F.C. Cooney he held that view a while back that Oristion wrote it because of that, and I think he's right. And by the way, that actually would put the long ending in like 135. That's when Oristion was running around. But to come back to what you were saying earlier, Neil, the Gospel of John being anti-Basilidian, that actually fits what I was saying earlier about the 135 date for John, and also the Schmiedel's comparison of Bar Kokhba to the murder from the beginning referenced in John. So that actually coordinates very well.
Yeah, but you know what's interesting about that? The reason why that's like Basilides here. I have it right here. When you read the Basilidian fragments in Hippolytus, for example, he's constantly quoting from John. So it's like, wait a minute, if John is the anti-Basilidian doctrine, which I agree with because of the doubting Thomas stuff, then why is Basilides quoting John all the time and nothing else? Because there probably was a different version of John that Basilides had. It's totally completely lost now. There's no way they would ever preserve that ever. They wouldn't even want to preserve that. So, like, for example, I'm just trying to find where it says, like, look right here. Basilides has its own peculiar time, saying he observes, "Mine hour is not come yet." He literally quotes from John. And he does it again over here. This is from the Nicolaitan. Yeah. But anyways, yeah, you can see he quotes from John right there.
I wonder, is he, or is it more like something he wrote in the Gospel of Basilides?
That's what I'm wondering what the Gospel of Basilides even is.
Because, like,
is it something like John?
It's like we need to think about this very carefully, because like some will try to say that Clement. Let's just give an example. That some will say that Clement was quoting Acts in two places when he actually doesn't. And I think the same thing could be said here about Basilides. Like, yeah, but it parallels John.
Corinthus and Basilides, from what we know, are like exactly the same in their doctrines. Where they all none of them care about the virgin birth. They only care about the baptism. Sure. They only care about the epiphany. That's central to their doctrine, right?
Sure. Yes.
And they're both shown to be quoting something like John or whatever. So it makes you wonder: is the Gospel of Basilidians just some other version of John, without the
another way? And another possibility is just another version of the Gospel of Corinthus.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That one. I'm talking about that, but yeah, exactly the same. I think if it would survive to today, what you would find is John 1 being exactly the same, with the logos there and all that stuff and the baptism. And then I would say once you start progressing towards the crucifixion, the stories are going to start changing. And then you might get something else. That's what I think. That's what I think is going on.
Yeah.
Like whoever wrote John, the canonical John that we know today, was trying to rewrite the Gnostic gospel. They're trying to rewrite it, fix it.
That's what I think John and Papias were probably doing. And I think that I think Corinthus wrote something, And there's definitely enough evidence to say that he did so it's not hypothetical, but it's a problem. What is the problem is that it's difficult to reconstruct it. And the Gospel of the Ebionites may be another glimpse into it from Epiphanius, possibly, but that's another conversation.
What is it again?
The Gospel of the Ebionites in
Oh,
that Epiphanius references.
yeah.
Something's
Oh,
happening.
what's interesting about Epiphanius? Oh, my camera. Here, you can just keep talking. I'll fix this in a second.
Yeah. Yeah, so Epiphanius has a little passage, or well, few passages from Ebionites. He doesn't quote it very much. A little something mentioning that John descends from Aaron. He doesn't specify that John is a cousin of Jesus. That's more like Luke's thing. Luke does that. No infancy narrative, no genealogy, which is something else that Epiphanius complains about, that there's no genealogy in it. So he says it's mutilating Matthew. And at one point he says that the Corinthians and the Merinthians and the Ebionites and the Nazarenes, they all believe in the same gospel. So he equates all these different movements in the sense that they're all using the same text, which makes me wonder if he could be engaged in conflation here, because I don't recall church fathers before him making such a claim like that. That, oh, it's all the same thing. He does that. So that's something to keep in mind.
Well, what's interesting about Epiphanius is he knows about all these weird corporal-creation miracles and stuff, but he just pretends that it's all orthodoxy. He's talking about the streams of rivers, right?
Yeah.
This right here, this is not. This is from the Basilidians, and he even uses he says the 11th of Tybe. Why would you use them? Why would you talk in the Egyptian months? Why wouldn't you use the regular Roman month? Because he's talking about Alexandrian doctrine. He's literally quoting from the Basilidian, who celebrate the birth of Christ on the 11th of Tybe. Why wouldn't he just say January 6th? Because look, right here he says January. But why does he switch it up to this? Because he's actually citing something else. And he's citing for example, what is his name? Clement of Alexandria talks about the Basilidians celebrating the birth of Christ on he says the 11th of Tybe. He uses this phrase. So, and then what happens on that day? It just happens to be the day where all these miracles happen, with streams of water turning into wine. And like, that's not part of orthodoxy. That doesn't happen in anything in orthodoxy. This is something else. This is some sort of other tradition that he's talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just think it's interesting how he has this. He's like taking all these traditions and just like putting them together, kind of, and then like condemning the parts he doesn't like, and then just like taking credit for the stuff he likes. That's what I noticed he does in this book a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he mentioned the Phrygians again here. Let me see what he says here. Basilidians. Basilidians. Trained by the Simonians and the Menandrians. The fuck's the Menandrians? Look at this. And it says there are 365 heavens and angelic names for them. Thus, the year 2 has the same number of days, and the name Abrasax has the name numeric value of 365. And he says that this is a holy name. I have quoted these remarks, the author who wrote against them in refutation for those who do not live rightly, and the Basilidians and Carpocratians, and those who are named for Valentinus and Epiphanes, with whom Secundus, who I placed before him, was associated. For whether the latter passed these horrors onto the former, or the former onto the latter, they bartered for them with each other. This is what you were just saying. Like he's basically saying they're all the same, right?
Yeah.
Trying to turn them all into the same Gnostic thing. It's kind of what he's doing. That's kind of what his strategy is. But then again, you look at them all one by one and you find out they have major differences too. Like Basilides is not the same as Carpocrates in his worldview at all. They have some overlap, but they're not the same. Valentinus is not the same as Marcion. Marcion is not the same as Corinthus. You know? They're not the same. They're all different. But what happens is these guys try to lump them all together as the same Gnostic thing. And that's how they do it. That's their strategy, and it works. You know? Anything else?
No, I think that's it for me. There is a couple of super chats that we missed.
Go ahead, bring them up.
You have to do it. I can't.
John 1 also seems to be the Nazarene document. To be a Nazarene document. James and Revelation as well. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think, as opposed to the other gospels, though. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on that. Do you think 1 through 3 John and John were written to counter Basilides? Not John 1 through 3. The later half of John, after you start getting into the resurrection, the doubting Thomas stuff, that's when I think they're starting to counter Basilides.
Yeah, I think I agree. The three letters of John.
The first 3 chapters of John are Basilidean to a T. I mean, that's what's in there, you know?
Yeah,
The wedding at Cana is Basilidean. Because that's the January 6th thing. And even Epiphanius even admits that. And the whole entire thing of the Epiphany is the birth, that's Basilidean. The baptism.
Yeah, I think the letters won the free John. I think.
The letters. Okay.
Yeah, I think he's talking about them. I put them in the 90s. I think probably 97. I think John of Ephesus. That's the guy that was confronting Corinthus. I think he was very concerned with division in the church, and also he was also in conflict with a man called Diotrephes.
But if you look at it, though, if you look at John 1, and I'm talking about the letter, 1 John, he gets right into the whole, you can tell, like, it's the word of life, this right here, logos zoes. That's from the Gospel of John, logos and zoe. There's your dyad right there. So this is definitely part of the same doctrinal family. Testified, was revealed, and proclaimed the eternal life, which was with the Father, which was revealed to us. Yeah, this language is Johannine. Like, there's nothing. I think the Basilidians would be like, if they'd be nodding their heads reading this. They'd go, yeah. What we have seen and heard proclaimed to you, and indeed our fellowship with the Father, with the Son. They go, yeah. These things we write to our joy made complete. That God is light. Yeah. Oh yeah. That's what they would say. Like that's Basilidian all day. I'm trying to see if there's anything that they would that strikes me as like anti-Basilidian in here. I don't think so. Let's keep going.
Would add to what it would add to me dating it earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if there's anything in here that like.
I think it could be hard pressed to find it.
Do not love the world nor the things in the world. Yeah, that is Basilidian too. That's what they would say. They would love saying that. They would agree. This is 100% what they would agree with. But you have an anointing from the Holy One, and you all know. A little children remain in him. Let's see how this. Let's just go to the last chapter real quick. Everyone who believes in Jesus Christ has been born of God. And everyone who loves the Father loves the little child of him. So, you know what's interesting about that is this might actually be sort of anti-Basilidian because Pisteuon, one of the things Basilides actually teaches is that pistis is not how this doesn't disagree with. He says that gnosis is higher than pistis. That's he's the only Gnostic that actually says that, by the way. Let me see when I'll show you what I mean when I'll show you what I mean right now, actually. Like Basilides, he's known for teaching Basilides taught salvation comes through knowledge, not faith. See, that's Basilides' Cambridge Dictionary. This is well known. The knowledge or gnosis was considered esoteric or revelation to human beings. Faith played no part in salvation. I mean, Clement says that, mentions this too. So let's just assume that's true. When you're reading the last chapter of First John, everyone who believes in Jesus has been born of God. I don't know if Basilides would agree with that. He'd probably go, you got to do more than just believe in the guy. You got to have the gnosis. So I actually think there might be there might be some sort of psyop happening here, where the letters start off 100% in line in step with Basilidian doctrine, but by the time you get to the end of it, you're like, it's all about faith again. So, this might be some sort of fucking psyop going on against the Gnostics. Wouldn't that be crazy? Because it's like, here it is again. Look, literally right in your face. Ho Pisteuon, the one who believes, the one who has faith, the one who has pistis in the Son, in the Huion. It says, the one who has faith in the Son has the testimony in himself. The one who does not believe has made him a liar because he has not believed. So this starts to take a turn. And it reminds me of the Gospel of John too. It's weird. The Gospel of John does the same thing. The Gospel of John starts off full step Basilidian to the core. And then as it progresses, it starts to take a turn to orthodoxy. Like a psyop, like a psychological operation to get the Gnostics to follow orthodoxy. Just saying, that's what it looks like. So look right here. Look at this. We know that the Son of God has come and has given us understanding so that we may know him who is true. It's a genoskomen. Like it comes from the root for gnosis. And it says, this is the true God and eternal life. Ionios. So, and that's another thing. It's like aletheon, the truth. That's a Basilidean buzzword too. So yeah, I don't know. There's something. It's weird. I don't know what to think about it. It looks like there's a little bit of both going on. Like it almost this is what I think is going on.
What is interesting?
I think there's an older version of these texts that are lost, and then they edited. These are edited. These are at some point these texts get edited to fit 3rd century Christianity's needs. That's my wild claim right now that I'm throwing out there.
What's interesting about 1 John is there's an occurrence of we throughout the entire letter, practically every chapter of the letter. Even the first verse in there, it says that which was from the beginning, which we have heard. And it's kind of like what we see in the Gospel of John as well. Like we know his testimony is true. John 21.
Yeah, it's written in the 3rd person plural.
Yeah,
the whole time.
So I have kind of wondered if that could mean. I mean, but same people potentially, but it's, I don't know. It's I still feel like that the letters, while they do thematically overlap with John, I do also think they're.
Wait, did I say 3rd person plural? I meant to say 1st person plural. We.
Yeah,
we. No, that's what I meant to say. Yeah, the whole thing's written in plural, 1st person, like we're all together. Yeah, the whole entire book, the whole entire letter. You're right. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to correct myself there.
no, it's fine.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know what to think about 1 John. What's the consensus dating on the John letters?
I think 90s.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
Johannine epistles. Let's see. So this is the thing. I agree with this. That it sounds it sounds like it's in line step with the Gospel of John. I agree with that, but I wouldn't. But what I think is going on, because once you start getting towards the end of these letters, things start to change up. Like starts to get into something different. Like it starts to change up from what it's doing, which makes me think that the text is edited. So there's an original version that is from the 85 to 90 period, and then the version we have today has a few edits going on, going back to, because remember this, the oldest actual fragment of John we have is 2nd century, and it's a little credit card piece. It's a little tiny piece like this. It's a little tiny piece.
Yeah, I'm aware.
What's the name of that again? It's called
R52, I think.
Yeah, P52. Yeah, right here. So this right here. I just want people to realize something for a second. Like, look at this. All you have is this. P52. Look how small it is. Little credit card size fragment of John. And if I'm not, the part that's actually shown is actually from chapter 18. So we don't know if there's doubting Thomas is actually in it. Right? We don't have any information on that. The next oldest John after this is like 3rd century. And then the first full John is like 4th century. Right? Oldest, let me look this up. Oldest manuscript of John that contains Doubting Thomas scene? The oldest manuscript of John that contains the Doubting Thomas scene is P66, which would be early 3rd century. Let me just look at that for a second. P66.
Mhm.
So P66. Oh, that's a big one. That's a big text right there. Okay, cool. So we got P66. Okay. For some reason, I thought P66 was later than that. I thought it was 4th. Let's see. It contains. What does it contain? It contains John 1 and all the way to 6. And then there you go, 20 through 21. There's your Doubting. It does have it. So, okay. Damn, look at these dates. 150 to 250. For some reason, I hate to be that guy just to go with what I want to be true. But I'm just going, for some reason, my gut's like, whatever scholar's pushing the 250, I believe they're right. I'm just saying. Because I'm just going off of I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. 3rd century. Let's go with 200. Let's be fair. So 3rd century is the first time we know for sure that John contains the gospel, or John contains the Doubting Thomas scene. Right? So we don't know. There could have been edits before. There could have been some changes between 200 and 100 AD. It's a whole 100 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, who knows? I don't think we'll ever. That's a question no one will ever know. Like, it's impossible to determine if what I'm saying is correct or not. It's impossible. It's just speculative. We don't know. And I'm basing it off of the fact that Basilides quotes from John, but then in other places, John completely is anti-Basilidean. That's why I'm saying. I'm not just saying this because I want it to be true. I'm saying it because I have a reason for it, you know? So, or like you said, or the Basilides and Corinthus and those guys had their own gospel that was similar to John, and then we lost that.
Think about this. Remember I said earlier that I think the 3 letters written by John of Ephesus, and I just read from Irenaeus earlier that he is opposing Corinthus. So your anti-Basilidean bits in 1 John could easily be explained by him being anti-Corinthus. Since Corinthus and Basilides have overlapping views, 1 John doesn't have to necessarily be later for that.
Yeah.
But the Gospel of John is more, and it's in a more complicated way, anti-Basilidean, I think, than the epistles are. And so I think that John is taking things up a notch.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair way of putting it.
I think so. Is there any more super chats?
No, I think this one. The Apocalypse of James.
I would have to, that's a lot right there.
Yeah.
We could go through that next time, and next time when you and I jump live, we could do that.
Yeah, well, we have another one scheduled, I think.
Pretty soon from now.
Yeah, and we can dive into it then, because we're going to be getting much more into my Paul paper.
Yeah, perfect timing for that. That's it, right?
That's it.
All right, and you've just attained true gnosis.